This man's name is Do Jong-sung. He was an undercover cop planted in a gang, but unfortunately, his cover was blown long ago. Now he's being pinned underwater by thugs and brutally tortured. When he finally gasps for a breath of fresh air, the blonde thug is already there with a knife, demanding his next move. Since Do won't talk, the guy turns to the boss to ask how to handle him. The boss scoffs. To him, all cops deserve to die, especially the rats. He stands up and walks over. The pressure makes the blonde thug snap. He tries to talk the boss down, saying it'll cause unnecessary trouble. But the boss ignores him and snatches the knife away. His eyes are deathly cold. The blonde thug starts bowing and scraping, promising to handle the hit quietly. But the next second, the boss drives the knife straight into him. Before he can react, the boss is choking the life out of him. Turns out, this blonde guy was a mole too. The boss saw through him from the start. As the grip tightens, the blonde guy's screams get more and more horrific. Do Jong-sung is breaking out in a cold sweat. To survive, he doubles down and exposes the other man. He claims he's done with the force. He begs for a chance, swearing his loyalty to the boss. The blonde guy is stunned. He can't believe his own partner would backstab him like this. But before he can utter a word, the boss tosses him aside like trash. Do thinks he's safe, but then, a brutal punch slams right into his face. The force sends him flying several meters back. 2 of his teeth fly out on the spot. His feet are already encased in concrete. There's no escape. What the boss hates most are backstabbing bastards. He admits Do is more capable than that other waste of space, so he'll let him die as a gang member. Within seconds, the place is up in flames. Both moles are buried in the fire. The boss shoves his hands in his pockets and walks away, like he just cleared out some garbage. Meanwhile, across town, our hero Ma Seok-do is dealing with a DUI. The problem is, the punk driver is being a total pain. Ma Seok-do isn't in the mood for talk. He moves in, but the guy slaps his hand away. The punk's face is beet red, reeking of booze, shouting that he hasn't had a drop. He's got the kind of face you just want to punch. The stench of booze was the last straw. Ma Seok-do lost his patience and ordered the guy to hand over his license. But the punk panicked and slammed the gas pedal to the floor. He tried to flee and mow Ma down in the process. Here's the crazy part. Ma didn't get hit. Instead, he lunged and clung to the moving car like a beast. He stared straight at the driver through the glass, looking completely bored. It nearly made the punk wet his pants. The car was hitting 80 kilometers per hour, yet Ma was steady as a rock, though clearly annoyed. He seriously wanted off this ride, so he decided to settle it with his fists. The next second, his punch smashed right through the window into the guy's face. The power was so insane the car veered wildly, and the impact sent Ma flying off into the street. The vehicle fishtailed across the road for a bit, before wrapping itself perfectly around a utility pole. Ma Seok-do felt a bit helpless. He just wanted the car to stop, but ended up making a bigger mess than intended. As for the 2 thugs inside, they were knocked out cold on the spot. Naturally, Ma got dragged back to the station for a massive scolding from his boss, Lee Sang-young. This wasn't his first rodeo. Lee had been cleaning up Ma's messes for a long time. Ma felt totally wronged. It wasn't his fault, but the higher-ups just wouldn't get off his back. Lee Sang-young wasn't buying any of it. To him, Ma Seok-do was a walking disaster who had already drained the station's budget. Lee was getting more frustrated by the second. He'd brought Ma in to handle things, but instead, before he could finish, Ma cut him off and demanded a transfer to the front line. From day one, he'd been aiming for the major crimes unit. He never expected to be stuck writing tickets. Lee shut him down instantly. In his eyes, a guy who brings chaos everywhere doesn't belong in major crimes. Even Ma's apology letters read like a threat. Lee ran a hand through his hair in pure frustration. The Hwang gang situation was already a nightmare, and now Ma was piling on. The moment Ma heard the word gang, his eyes lit up. Lee tried to stay quiet, but Ma kept digging, eventually slamming his fist onto the desk in excitement. A liquor bottle on the desk became a tragic casualty of that move. With no other choice, Lee spilled the whole story. The Hwang gang started back in 1990, after the government broke the Byumchon gang. The leftovers regrouped into what they are today. They rose fast, backed by Chairman Jang of the Youth Group, a man who pulls strings across the entire political world. Simply put, they are a gang with old-school roots and corporate protection. They have zero restraint. The police sent 2 undercover agents into the den, but both were brutally murdered after their cover was blown. The investigation stalled because the elites protected them. Even Ma Seok-do was stunned. He couldn't believe they were bold enough to target police officers. That's when Lee Sang-young finally dropped the bomb. The head of the Hwang gang, the man called the fiercest enforcer since the legendary Kim Do-han, is Jo Tae-se. The police have been dying to catch him, but the guy is a ghost. He never shows his face, and there's always a lackey ready to take the fall for him. To bring Jo down, they need concrete proof of his ties to Chairman Jang. When Ma Seok-do hears the name Jo Tae-se, he freezes. He knows that name all too well. Even Lee didn't expect these two to have such a history. Turns out, Ma and Jo were high school classmates. But they didn't meet in class, they met in the boxing ring. Back then, Joe was a monster with an undefeated record, 26 wins and 1 draw. He swept the Rookie of the Year awards and took the national championship. Ma could never accept that loss. He challenged Joe several more times over the years. But then, the golden boy of boxing suddenly vanished without a trace. After a few drinks, Ma gets chatty. He admits the only reason he picked up boxing was to one day beat the living hell out of Joe Taisei. But look at them now. Joe is living the high life, while Ma is stuck getting disciplined. He jokes that maybe he should have just become a thug too. Lee snaps at him immediately, telling him to watch his mouth. Ma backs off with a smirk, claiming it was just a joke. But right then, an idea strikes Lee Sang-young. He looks at Ma and asks, "Do you really want into major crimes that badly?" The scene cuts to the docks, a branch territory of the Huang Gang. A few thugs are idling in front of a shipping container. They're complaining about being low-level grunts after all these years, while gossiping about the new guy everyone's talking about. Speak of the devil, and he appears. A luxury car rolls to a stop and the new advisor steps out. The Huang Gang used to be nothing but muscle. To level up, they hired a brain. This is So Sung-yup, the gang's third-ranking strategist. "Hey, everything quiet, then get lost. I've got work to do for the boss." He warns the underlings to stay out of his way while he's working, or they'll pay for it. The container doors swing open, revealing rows of women in heavy makeup. Seo sits down like a judge and starts assigning the day's shifts. The young ones go to the clubs, the mature ones to the tea houses. Even the plain-looking older women are matched with spots that fit his requirements. Once he's done, he lights a cigarette, looking disgusted. He's a college graduate, for God's sake. And here he is, acting as a pimp for a group of women. He singles out Miss Kim, who approaches him nervously. Seo starts groping her, casually mentioning he could set her up with some breast implants. Miss Kim is confused and clearly uncomfortable, but before she can even process it, Seo's demands get more graphic and depraved. Miss Kim panics, trapped in the tight space with nowhere to go. And her desperate attempts to dodge him finally snap Seo's thin thread of patience. Just at that moment, a voice cracked through the radio, one of the goons saying a group of girls had arrived for the interview. Annoyed at the interruption, So Sung-yup snapped at them to stop bothering him with small-time crap. But the goon added one detail. "Boss, these girls, they are seriously stacked." Hearing that, Seo instinctively compared them to Miss Kim sitting next to him. He changed his mind instantly. "Bring them in, now." The container doors swung open again, and in walked a woman with long blonde waves and an unnaturally massive chest. Her makeup was thick enough to be a painting. She was wielding an iron pipe, and the second she saw Seo, she let out a flirty, "Oppa." Seo's eyes nearly popped out of his skull. He almost choked on yesterday's lunch. Then, a whole line of identical muscle Barbies filed in behind her. Before he could scream, the leader dropped the act. They were from the rival Blackfish Gang. Seo went pale. This was a hit. He couldn't wrap his brain around how they got past security. The thug leader sneered. "Blame your window tint. It's so dark your boys thought it was you coming back and just waved us through." As for the guards at the gate, already neutralized, Seo tried to play it cool, warning them not to push their luck. But they had the numbers and a list of his sins: stealing turf, mistreating women. Tonight, Seo was a dead man walking. Seeing his life on the line, Seo folded like a lawn chair. He blamed everything on Joe Taisei and tried to buy them off. But before he could finish, they shoved an ashtray into his mouth to shut him up. They didn't want money tonight. They wanted his head. Finding Seo's mangled body would be the ultimate warning to the Huang Gang. Just then, a massive hand clamped down on the thug's tattooed arm. Suddenly, the most off-key, soul-crushing singing imaginable blasted through the mic and into everyone's ears. The muscle Barbie in drag was none other than Ma Seok-do. He was fully immersed in his own deadly concert, zeroed in on the music, not giving a damn about anyone's eardrums. The thug leader finally realized this singer from hell wasn't one of his guys. But before he could swing, Ma Seok-do's fist met his face. The impact was legendary, dropping the guy stiff as a board, like a puppet with its strings cut. Ma finally explained his interview. He'd seen the ad for high-paying hostesses and decided to apply. Why here? Because he had intel that the Blackfish Gang would raid tonight, the last clue from a fallen comrade. Their target was Seo Sang-yup, and Ma needed him alive to climb the ladder to the top. He slammed the mic onto the table, sending a piercing shriek of feedback through the room. Everyone doubled over, clutching their ears in agony. Only Ma Seok-do stood unfazed, advancing like a final boss entering the arena. Then came the highlight reel. Ma Seok-do dropping thugs with single punches, leading the whole pack screaming for mercy. But the leader managed a sneak attack, locking Ma in a desperate bear hug from behind. The guy grinned, thinking he had him. Ma just looked bored, his eyes saying, "Is that it?" Just as the iron pipe was coming down, Ma Seok-do snapped. He lifted a leg and stomped those high heels right onto the thug's foot. A blood-curdling scream erupted from behind. The tables turned instantly, and the thug learned the meaning of agonizing pain. Ma blocked an incoming swing with one hand and delivered a back elbow that smashed the wig face behind him. While the guy was still mid-air, Ma followed up with a powerhouse punch that sent him flying for yards. Within minutes, the Blackfish gang were all on the floor, groveling like spineless cowards. Afterward, Seo Sun-yup limped over to say thanks. He knew he'd be a corpse if not for this Amazon in front of him. Seeing how clean Ma's moves were, Seo assumed he was a secret reinforcement sent by the gang, one of their own. Ma scoffed at the term. He said his old crew was long gone. Now he was just a lone wolf. He told Seo he'd planned to go straight, and that he only came for the interview to make a quick buck. He claimed he only stepped in because he couldn't stand seeing a massacre. Seo looked at his own injured hand, realizing that in this world, might makes right. As a brainy strategist, he desperately needed a heavy hitter to back him up. This person was a godsend. Right then and there, he decided to recruit Ma under his wing. This was exactly Ma's play, but he had to play hard to get. He put on a troubled face and declined, saying he didn't want to crawl back into the gutter. He turned to leave. Seo scrambled to stop him, dropping a heavy line. A fish belongs in water, and if you want to wash your hands, you need money to do it. He promised Ma he'd make 100 times more than his old pay. Poor Seo didn't realize he was walking into a trap. He lit a cigarette and started bragging about how legendary the Huang gang was. Then he pulled out another cigarette, held it out to Ma, and invited him to join the winning team. Ma took the cigarette smoothly. For the mission and for major crimes, he stopped the act. He looked Seo in the eye and asked, "So should I start calling you boss?" And just like that, Ma Seok-do ditched the uniform and stepped onto the razor-thin line of undercover life. In truth, saving Seo was just baiting the hook. Once the strategist owed him his life, getting into the gang was easy. Rewind to the briefing. When Lee Sang-yong asked how he'd infiltrate, Ma's answer was classic. Just beat 'em all to a pulp, right? The words weren't even out before Lee splashed a glass of liquor right in his face. Lee barked at him. "This is an investigation, not a street brawl. It's almost 1994, cops need to use their brains. From now on, you're not a cop, you're a Huang gang thug." Then Lee mapped out the hierarchy. Jo Tae-se at the top, followed by 5 ranks. Advisor, second in command, chief, action captain, and members. Ma's goal was to become Joe's confidant. He didn't need to be second in command. Action captain was enough. Captains were the elite. They knew where the bodies were buried. Lee's plan used the debt from saving Seo as a golden ticket. Ma would ride that momentum, climbing until he sat as a captain, close enough to Joe to nail him for good. Of course, Ma had a simpler idea. Why not just kill the current captain, and I'll take his spot? Lee shut that down instantly. A real gang like the Huang gang respects seniority. A brainless leapfrog like that would never fly. If he wanted the spot, he had to play by the rules and learn to endure. For once, Ma Seok-do actually stayed silent. Seeing the stubborn look on his face, Lee Sang-yong asked again, "Did you actually hear me?" Ma quickly nodded. Lee was still skeptical, but the die was cast. From this moment on, Officer Ma Seok-do was dead, replaced by Ma Seok-do the gangster. Back to the present. Ma Seok-do was sitting numbly in the dorm, listening to some idiot teach him the correct way to greet a boss. He was losing his mind with boredom, but to play the part of a respectful newbie, he had to sit there and take it. This was the Huang gang dorm, basically a den for wannabe thugs. Word was, you had to survive this hellish training just to get a foot in the door. Rank in the dorm was strictly by seniority. Ma was the last one in, making him rank 4 the house punching bag. The two fighting over the TV were the rank 2s, Weasel and Mantu. And the guy currently barking in Ma's face was Pai Yu rank 3. Ma was in a tight spot because he'd lied about having a stomachache and couldn't shout aloud enough, "Boss!" Pai Yu jumped at the chance to tear him a new one. Ma was fuming. "I was headhunted for this, and now I'm being lectured by this loser?" When Pai Yu finally finished screaming, he tossed a booklet at Ma. "The code of conduct, memorize it, every word." Ma's eyes lit up. Finally, the key evidence he needed had just fallen into his lap. He tucked the booklet away instantly. When Pai Yu looked confused, Ma played it off. "I just really respect the gang's rules, you know?" Pai Yu, being an idiot, bought it and told him to read it aloud. There was going to be a quiz later. Obey seniors unconditionally. Sacrifice yourself for the gang. Loyalty above all. Reading this crap, Ma wanted to laugh. A bunch of killers and thieves talking about workplace ethics. They should have started with learning the law. But Pai Yu didn't notice the smirk. He was too drunk on the power of being called senior. Then Ma dropped a question that broke Pai Yu's brain. "So when do I become an action captain?" Pai Yu laughed in his face. "Captain? Kid, you'll be lucky if you even make it to full-time status. Look, we're all just interns here. Bottom of the barrel. Even those two over there at the TV, just interns." There was only one guy in the room who actually mattered. He was currently sleeping in the back room. His job? Turning these piles of trash into real gangsters. Only after making full member could Ma even think about being a captain. Ma pressed him. "How long does that take?" Pai Yu held up 2 fingers. 2 years, minimum. That number hit Ma like a brick. He had zero intention of wasting 2 years in this dump with these losers. Just then, Weasel at the TV snapped. He swung around and slapped the back of Pai Yu's head with a loud crack. He told Pai Yu to shut up and stop showing off just because a new guy arrived. Not satisfied, he kicked Pai Yu to the floor and started stomping on his back. After trashing Pai Yu, Weasel turned his cold eyes on Ma. Your boss is getting beat and you're just watching? Without warning, he wound up and drove a punch straight into Ma's gut. But a second later, Weasel realized something was wrong. Ma's face, it was terrifying. Ma was white-knuckling his rage. He almost flipped the table and sent everyone in the room to the ICU right then. Finally, he ground out through clenched teeth. My stomach, I just couldn't react. The noise finally brought the real deal out of the back room. He kicked the door open and roared, "What the hell is going on out here?" The shout was so loud, Weasel dropped his cigarette onto his own foot. The group snapped to attention like they'd been electrocuted, bowing in unison. The man swept a murderous gaze over them. "Did I ask if you were okay? You want to die?" This was the enforcer in charge, Dharma. The scene cuts to Chairman John of the youth group, casually enjoying a round of golf. Behind him, a chorus of sycophants echoes every move with cheap flattery. And the ringleader of this circus is none other than Zhou Taisei, the big boss of the Huang gang. Jiang offers him a club to join in, but Zhou laughs it off, saying he's not old enough for senior sports yet. John doesn't skip a beat. "If you're not playing, go fetch my ball." Zhou says nothing. He just gives a subtle nod to his second-in-command. But here's the twist. What they drag back isn't a golf ball, it's a human being. The poor bastard is pinned to the grass by the enforcer, gasping like a fish out of water. Chairman John raises his club, winding up as if he's about to drive it 300 yards through the man's skull. He stops the head of the club exactly 1 inch from Director Yao's face. "I want a reason, Yao," Jiang whispers. "Where did you get the balls to embezzle 300 million won? You could have bought 2 luxury condos in Gangnam with that." The tape is ripped off Yao's mouth with a violent jerk. He instantly starts wailing, begging for one last chance. John puts a finger to his lips. Shh! He doesn't want to hear that garbage. He wants the why. Why did this coward think he could steal from a tiger? After hearing Yao's stammered explanation, Jiang bursts into a manic laugh. "Oh Yao, you're a romantic. Stealing for your wife's medical bills? I'm almost moved to tears. Since you're such a hero, let's settle this like men, with our fists." Simple rules. If Yao's fist touches John even once, the debt is wiped. John even promises to cover the medical bills himself. "I've been into boxing lately and needed a punching bag. What do you say, Yao? Fair deal, right?" Seeing a glimmer of hope, Yao scrambles up and agrees. He figures John is just a 60-year-old man. A desperate swing is better than certain death. He puts everything into a wild haymaker. But a second later, a bone-crunching blow smashes into his jaw. That's when Yao realizes, every time Jiang moves, the enforcer behind him throws the real punch in perfect sync. Jiang turns to Zhou with a grin. "Was my form okay? This human tool of yours is incredibly handy." Yao doesn't even have the breath left to beg. A barrage of heavy punches rains down, each one aimed to kill. John laughs like a lunatic with every hit, bragging that he could have won Olympic gold if he were 10 years younger. It doesn't take long for Yao to collapse into a heap of broken meat. But it's not over. John crouches down, his voice dripping with chilling delight. "Stealing from me is very, very expensive. Let's play a guessing game. If I clench my fist, the whole Wang gang punches with me. But if I raise a golf club, what do you think those psychos will pick up? Aren't you even a little curious? After all, there's only one golf club here." Back at the dorm, Mantu and Weasel are tied together, with a pair of underwear pulled over their heads in total humiliation. Dharma is screaming in their faces. The reason? Laundry. "I told you I like strawberry scent? You used blueberry? Are you trying to die?" The two beg for their lives, promising to wash it again. Suddenly, Dharma holds a hand out in front of Weasel. Before Weasel can even process the gesture, slap! A thunderous blow sends him spinning. Dharma follows up with a backhand that swells the other side of his face instantly. Then comes the real nightmare, a relentless, machine gun barrage of strikes. Masokto silently watched the scene, completely speechless. While Dharma was busy chewing out Mantu and Weasel, Ma made a mental note, strawberry-scented fabric softener. Inwardly, he calculated his climb to the top. Eventually, Dharma cooled down and noticed Masokto. Learning he was the new recruit, Dharma held his hand out, palm up. He barked, "What are you standing there for? Get over here." Ma froze, thinking the guy wanted to settle things with a fight. He didn't want trouble on day one, but if the boss was calling him out, he had to answer. But as Ma stepped forward, Dharma lunged and grabbed him right in the crotch. That sudden, cheap shot left Ma completely stunned. The light vanished from his eyes. As Dharma tightened the grip, Ma's face twisted into a mask of pure agony. He never expected his one and only weak point to be hit with such surgical precision. Looking at the others smirking, Ma's rage reached a boiling point. He'd held back the urge to wipe them out, all for that captain spot. Was he really supposed to swallow this humiliation for 2 years without fighting back? Right then, a thought flashed. He didn't have to wait 2 years. Under Dharma's confused gaze, Ma Seok-do actually started smiling. He had found a way. Weasel and Mantu joked that he was enjoying the pain. Dharma squeezed even harder just to be a jerk. Even a monster like Ma couldn't handle that kind of pain. His knees buckled on the spot. But he knew it wasn't time. He had to endure and wait for the perfect chance. Later that night, Pai Yu was outside waiting for Ma to return with the strawberry fabric softener. Seeing Ma standing there, Pai Yu waved him over and handed him a snack. He explained he'd saved it for a bad day, but decided to share it after seeing what Ma went through. He told Ma to eat it secretly, or the seniors would beat them both. He said he understood how it felt to be at the bottom. He'd been there himself. Before Ma could speak, Pai Yu started spilling his life story. He had 3 younger sisters. Their parents ditched them back in middle school. They'd been surviving on their own for years. He was only 19. Ma realized the kid was technically a high school student supporting his whole family. He delivered newspapers at dawn for pennies just to keep them fed. But then disaster struck. 2 burglars broke into his home and held knives to his sisters' throats. Pai Yu felt his blood pressure hit the roof. As he rushed in, he was paralyzed by fear. He was just a kid. At the height of his despair, heroes appeared and beat the burglars senseless. The irony? Those heroes were gangsters. That's right, the ones who stepped up to stop this disaster were actually thugs. Pai Yu's neighborhood was full of thieves, but it also had plenty of gangsters. That day, when the loud noise erupted inside the house, nearby gang members heard it and rushed straight over. From that moment on, even if the world called them trash, in Pai Yu's eyes, they were the true heroes who saved him and his sisters. Back then, he didn't even have time to say thank you before they vanished. That quick exit only made them feel more like the wandering heroes of legend. From that day on, Pai Yu was determined to follow in their footsteps, embarking on his so-called path of chivalry. Ma Seok-do listened, but his internal monologue was a different story. To him, the kid was delusional, romanticizing a bunch of lowlifes. Simply put, these thugs were just factory-producing trash. Pai Yu kept preaching to Ma to hang in there, saying no matter how hard life gets, you have to survive. He claimed once he became a high-ranking member, Ma would be glad he stuck around. He even grinned and told Ma, "Trust me, kid. Just follow my lead, and you'll be living the high life." Ma Seok-do had no choice but to go along with it, dropping another half-hearted boss to keep up the act. Their heart-to-heart was interrupted by the food delivery. Pai Yu told Ma to grab the food while he went inside to set the table. Sure, Pai Yu's past was tragic, but to Ma, a sob story didn't change the facts. A thug is a thug. Period. But the moment Ma took the delivery, the driver casually called out his real name. Ma looked closer. Unbelievable. The delivery guy was Lee Sang-yong. Seeing Ma safely inside the gang, Lee let out a huge sigh of relief. Ma was baffled, asking if Lee had gone undercover at a Chinese restaurant. Lee awkwardly explained he was just working part-time for a convenient meetup spot. Then he admitted his prediction was wrong. He thought saving Seo Sang-gyup would get Ma an instant promotion. But seeing Ma in those intern rags made it clear that Seo had no intention of letting him skip the line. Still, he had a new mission. There's a full member in the dorm named Dharma, looks like a big, angry doll. Ma's next job, push Dharma into an action captain spot. Ma needed to shake things up to get closer to the top. Lee warned him repeatedly, "Don't be a hero. One step at a time. Don't blow the whole case because you lost your cool." Ma Seok-do clearly ignored every word, his mind already spinning on how to promote Dharma. Before leaving, Lee added one last thing. Watch out for the action captains. The Wong Gang is an elite squad. Those captains are monsters. Ma couldn't afford to make enemies out of them. Ma didn't care. To him, they were just bottom-tier punks. If they stepped out of line, he'd just flatten them and move on. He didn't even get to finish his insult before Lee shut him down, warning that he'd end up dead if he tried that. Remember this, those guys are the real deal. Cut to Huang Gang territory. So Sang-gyup is tearing into his men, spit flying everywhere. He roared at them, demanding to know which unit was so incompetent they couldn't even handle a simple collection. One guy raised his hand and apologized, but Seo wasn't having it. He kicked the man hard, asking if he still wanted to stay in the gang. Mistakes are paid for in blood. That kick lit the guy's fuse. He was about to spit back a curse, and Seo's face turned deathly cold, but the guy didn't back down. He snapped right back. "You think money grows on trees? Everyone is using the crisis as an excuse. They're broke. What am I supposed to do?" He mocked so. "Only the guys in the field know how messy it is. A desk jockey like you doesn't know a damn thing about reality." Faced with Seo's threats, the man looked disgusted. To him, Seo was just a paper pusher who got lucky with a degree. Being forced to call him boss made him sick to his stomach. Just as the guy told Seo to stop talking and settle it with blood, a jeep came roaring in from out of nowhere. In the next second, the vehicle plowed straight into the man, the terrifying force launching him through the air and slamming him against a shipping container. Before anyone could react, the jeep lunged forward like a predator, crushing him so hard that blood sprayed from his mouth instantly. Then the jeep slammed into reverse and rolled over the man again, over and over, treating him like roadkill. Seo Sung-yap watched the gruesome scene unfold, his legs turning to lead, rooting him to the spot. When he finally mustered the courage to step closer, all that was left was a massive, sickening pool of blood. Only then did the driver slowly push open the door and step out. It was none other than the Huang Gang's other heavyweight, Action Captain Cho Won-pil. Looking at the carnage, Cho smirked and joked, "Well, since there's already blood on it, maybe I should just paint the whole car red." Seo swallowed hard and managed to stammer, If you were coming, you could have at least given a heads up." Cho shot him an icy glare. "A heads up? Not my style. Stop waving your hands around and go back to playing with your calculator." With that, he stomped his boot hard into the bloody mess on the ground, unleashing a storm of vicious curses and kicks. Seo watched the mad dog in action, too terrified to even breathe. Once Cho had vented his rage, he casually ordered Seo to check the dead man's insurance. Tell them it was a hit and run. Clean up the mess. Then he looked around and laid down the law. "As far as I'm concerned, today never happened. As long as no one touches my money, I don't care. But if anyone touches my money, even if it's a cop, I'll kill them dead." Meanwhile, back at the dorm, the vibe was completely different. Ma Suk-do was doing a brutal head-down plank. Dharma was pacing with a thick wooden stick, handing out corporal punishment to the interns. The reason for this torture? It sounded like a joke. Someone had ordered fried rice instead of the standard black bean noodles. Since nobody was confessing, Dharma went down the line, smacking each of them with the stick as a warning. The real culprit, Ma Suk-do, was sweating and cursing internally. All this over a bowl of fried rice? How cheap can you get? Dharma wasn't an idiot. He knew damn well the new guy was the one who did it. But suddenly, Pai-yu raised his head and yelled, "It was me!" Ma froze. He couldn't believe this kid was actually taking the fall for him. Dharma immediately used it as a teaching moment. "See? This is why we have discipline. In the underworld, death is always one step away. The organization must move as one. If even one guy thinks for himself, the whole gang collapses. That's why we make you live together in this rat hole." In Dharma's eyes, Pai-yu acting out of line was a threat to the gang's very foundation. So he swung the stick, bringing it down hard on Pai-yu's back, over and over. Ma frowned. He couldn't figure it out. What was Pai-yu getting out of this? Why go this far for him? Soon, Pai-yu's face was a bruised, swollen mess, blood dripping steadily from his nose. Yet, the stubborn fire in his eyes hadn't faded. He even managed a weak smile, as if telling Ma, "I told you I'd look out for you." Ma cursed inwardly, "You idiot. Worry about your own survival before you try to protect me." Furious that Pai-yu wouldn't break, Dharma kicked him hard to the floor. Pinning him down with a knee to the back, Dharma raised the heavy wooden stick high, aiming a lethal strike right at Pai-yu's skull. Seeing that, Pai-yu desperately apologized and begged for mercy. Right at that critical moment, Ma Suk-do finally couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed Dharma's arm, forcefully stopping the farce. "I was the one who ordered the fried rice, so let's leave it at that." Weasel and Mantu, standing behind them, never expected him to have that kind of strength. Dharma furiously demanded to know if he had any idea what he was doing. This was insubordination. He was the only full member here, and the only one who could get them promoted. Ma Suk-do looked completely unfazed. "Promotion? I can get that done without you." The second those words left his mouth, he snatched up a bowl of black bean noodles and slammed it right into Dharma's face. The sheer force drove Dharma straight to the ground. That one move completely stunned the other two. By striking first, Ma Suk-do seized the upper hand in an instant. In his eyes, if he was going to play the hero, the least he could do was demand justice here. Thanks to Pai-yu, he had finally found his opening to climb higher. Ma raised his fists and told Dharma to choose, left or right. As the final countdown rang out, Dharma had only one thought in his head, dodge right. But in the next second, both of Ma's fists came crashing down at once. The ground seemingly cracked under the impact. Dharma failed to dodge and was knocked unconscious on the spot. Ma rolled his shoulders, then turned to look at the other two. From this moment on, late-night mealtime has begun, and the old rules are dead. Everyone joins in, or you wait to get beaten. Pai-yu stared blankly at the scene, his brain clearly not catching up yet. Weasel instantly exploded, warning Ma not to treat them like random street punks just because he'd been around a few days. This was the Huang Gang. Right after that, he called out to Mantu. While Mantu lunged from behind to lock Ma in a bear hug, Weasel charged straight in, fist swinging. But Ma simply dipped his body downward. Weasel's punch smashed squarely into Mantu's face behind him. With a dull thud, Mantu dropped stiffly to the floor. Even Weasel hadn't expected friendly fire. Humiliated, his anger turned into a fresh attack as he lunged at Ma again. Ma merely shifted aside, dodging it with ease once more. Weasel smirked inwardly, thinking Ma was a coward who only knew how to dodge. But Ma's fist shattered that fantasy instantly. Catching Weasel off guard, he drove a straight punch directly into his face. It looked like a casual hit, but it blasted Weasel clean off his feet, and that was just the most basic move in boxing. us straight. Just then, Dharma groaned awake. He angrily shouted at Ma, threatening that once he reported this, Ma was dead. Ma didn't care at all. Report what? That a bunch of veterans and full members got their asses beat by the new rookie? You seniors were supposed to discipline newcomers, but got smashed instead. What will the bosses think when they find out? Besides, you're about to graduate from full member status soon. You wouldn't dare report this now. If the higher-ups find out what happened here, I'm not the one who's ruined. You useless losers are. So if you don't want to pack your bags and get tossed out, keep your mouth shut. From this moment on, the boss in this room has changed. After the chaos died down, everyone finally sat and started eating properly. The ranking inside the dorm was completely reshuffled. Weasel fell to 4th place. Mantu became number 3. And Dharma was reduced to the absolute bottom. The second he reached for his chopsticks, smack, Ma punched him right on the head, just because he failed to use respectful speech toward his boss. Ma was now number 1 in the dorm, while Pai Yu, due to his earlier loyalty, was raised to 2nd place. Gripping Dharma right in the crotch, Ma coldly asked, "So what's my next job?" Dharma gasped in agony, completely misunderstanding the threat. Crying in a panic, he blurted out, "Be boss, you're ready to go out on jobs." These so-called jobs, put simply, meant extorting protection money. The Huang gang controlled plenty of shops, and that dirty work was the daily routine for members like them. Ma Seokdo genuinely didn't expect Dharma to be driving such a decent car. He casually joked that if the car was this good, why not just sell it instead of collecting protection money? Dharma hurried to explain that the car wasn't even his. It was rented. That made Ma even more confused. If it was rented, wouldn't it be better to save the rental money and just use it to pay the protection fee? Dharma looked completely dumbfounded, wondering if this guy understood gang rules at all. He finally admitted the car was borrowed from Taowon Byung. That action captain was somewhat close to him, and if Dharma hadn't borrowed it, he would have been screwed. He was forced into it. Hearing that the guy was still ruthlessly collecting rental fees from his friend, Ma couldn't help but doubt if their relationship was really as good as Dharma claimed. Ma couldn't be bothered to ask more. He scoffed and called him a coward, then reminded Dharma that outside, Ma was the boss. If anyone blew their cover, neither of them would survive. Before long, the two arrived at their destination. Outside a shop, a stern-looking old woman was standing by the door. Ma Seokdo asked, "Is this the place?" Dharma nodded, explaining they didn't just collect turf fees, but also protection money. And this household was already months behind. Dharma lowered his voice and warned him that the old woman had a seriously bad temper. Seeing Dharma's nervous fidgeting, Ma sighed in frustration and decided to handle it himself. Truth be told, he was used to catching thugs, not extorting people. He'd never done something like collecting protection money, and just standing at the doorway made his skin crawl. The old woman, who initially greeted them with a warm smile, became instantly agitated the moment she realized why they were there. Ma Seokdo couldn't help grumbling internally. He clearly had the face of a decent guy, so why was he forced to do this kind of dirty work? Since it was his first time doing a job like this, he figured he was supposed to flash the collection bag first, and then arrogantly prop his foot up on the table. Even though Ma felt he was terrible at acting the part, the sheer, crushing aura he gave off made him look more like a gangster than an actual gangster. So without needing to say much, he managed to collect every single cent of the money. Even Ma Seokdo was stunned. Just one quick trip, and he had already collected what amounted to 3 months of his police salary. He couldn't help but question reality. Why did everyone just hand the cash over the second he walked in? Was extorting money really this easy? For one absurd second, a wild thought crossed his mind. Was he just naturally born to be a thug? Protection money came way too fast. But the scene that followed completely shattered that illusion. When the old woman turned around, her hunched back carried an unspeakable sense of sorrow and defeat. The little girl beside her, completely clueless about what just happened, innocently tugged at her mother and asked what was wrong. The old woman desperately choked back her tears, forcing a smile as she told her daughter everything was fine. But the tears just wouldn't stop falling. Standing in the distance and watching this, Ma Seokdo fell into a long, heavy silence. The scene cuts. Dharma looked down, counting the thick stack of cash in his hands, grinning from ear to ear. He couldn't help praising Ma's talent for clearing the bad debt in one go. What kind of sorcery did you use in there? But before he could even finish, Ma Seokdo slapped the back of his head. With a cold expression, Ma warned him, "When it's just the two of us, remember to speak formally to your boss." Then, Ma coldly ordered, "Don't ever bring me to shake down innocent civilians again. Do you have any targets that actually put up a real fight?" Dharma understood immediately. "I mean, sure we do, but those guys won't just hand over the cash nicely." He explained that those shops were basically run by other thugs, advising Ma to stick to easy targets. But Ma told him to shut up and lead the way. Since his intimidation tactics worked so well, he might as well test them on some real gangsters. Very soon, the two arrived at their next destination, Youth Karaoke. The owner of this joint was Huang Chun-sik, a local thug who had moved to Seoul and managed to carve out a name for himself. Hearing the reason for the visit, Huang Chun-sik laughed. I scraped my way to the top in Seoul. Who the hell do I need protection from? What did Cho Won-pil send you? Ma Seok-do replied completely deadpan, no. Huang laughed even harder. If he didn't send you, then why are you here? Free handouts? Right then, a pair of massive hands clamped onto Ma's shoulders. A hulking brute, even taller than Ma, glared down and warned him not to start trouble here. There was no warning, no wind up. In the next split second, Ma's iron fist buried itself into the giant's face. It was like someone hit the pause button. The brute's eyes rolled back, and he dropped stiff to the floor, instantly shut down. Even Huang Chun-sik was stunned. He never expected his top guy to get flatlined with one punch. Ma slowly pulled his fist back and stared at Huang. Now can we finally have a proper talk? Huang sneered, mocking Ma for having a death wish by coming after his money. You're out of luck, kid. All my boys are here today for a get-together. You just walked into a firing squad. Most people would have pissed themselves seeing the crowd closing in, but Ma looked around and actually smiled. Because to him, this was perfect. A fight is only fun when there are enough bodies to punch. Meanwhile, Dharma was pacing anxiously outside the karaoke bar. Just as he was imagining the worst, bang! A figure came flying out the front door. Dharma blinked in shock. The man tumbling across the pavement was Huang Chun-sik himself. Before Dharma could even process it, Ma casually strolled out the door. In his hand, he was holding a ridiculously out-of-place shrimp cracker bag, and it was bulging with thick stacks of cash. Dharma's jaw hit the floor. He couldn't comprehend how Ma did it, but Ma brushed past him, tossing out, "I've got an errand to run," and walked away. The scene cuts back to the small shop from earlier. The old woman was wiping tables, still heartbroken over the hard-earned cash that was taken from her. As she worked, tears silently streamed down her wrinkled face. Suddenly, her daughter called out to her. The old woman turned around and froze. Her little girl was holding the exact same shrimp cracker bag Ma had taken earlier. The old woman panicked, asking where she got it. The girl innocently replied, "That uncle from earlier gave it to me." The old woman was thunderstruck. What shocked her more was that the bag contained far more money than she had handed over. The little girl smiled brightly. "That uncle is different. He said he isn't a gangster. He's a hero." Back at the dorm, Ma was casually eating while maintaining a vice grip on Dharma's crotch. Dharma, crying in agony, begged him, "Boss, please tell me, where did you put the money we collected from that shop?" Ma stubbornly replied, "I told you, I lost it." Dharma completely panicked. That money had to be handed over to Action Captain Cho Won-pil today. Hearing the name, Ma remembered the jerk who rented the car. He raised an eyebrow. "Is that guy really that scary?" Dharma went pale. "It's not about being scary. The guy is a psychopath. Anyone who touches his money dies. He doesn't even care if you're a cop." Just recently, he beat a full member into the ICU because the guy was short on his collection. To Dharma, Cho was the ultimate greedy maniac and the most dangerous kind of miser. Ma was still wondering if Dharma was just exaggerating. Suddenly, a heavy, sharp intake of breath echoed from the stairwell. Then, a thunderous roar blasted up from downstairs, making Dharma flinch. "Get your ass down here right now!" That thunderous roar from downstairs instantly shattered the nerves of everyone in the dorm. Even Dharma, who was playing tough a second ago, started sweating bullets. Ma Seok-do was still wondering who the hell just arrived, but Dharma was already so terrified he was practically pissing himself. Because of the overdue tribute, Action Captain Cho Won-pil had come knocking in person. When Cho stepped into the room, he was greeted by an incredibly pathetic theatrical performance. Dharma was putting on a show, aggressively screaming at his guys, demanding to know who lost the collected money. After finishing his little act, Dharma pretended to just notice Cho. With a fake smile, he rushed over. "Hyung, why did you come all the way down here? I was just about to call you." Ma rolled his eyes internally. "This is what you meant by 'I'll handle it'? Only an idiot would buy acting this bad." Dharma kept his head bowed, apologizing and accepting punishment, clinging to a sliver of hope. "We've known each other for years. Surely he'll cut me some slack." But in the very next second, without any warning, Cho grabbed a liquor bottle and smashed it ruthlessly over Dharma's head. With a sickening shatter, glass and blood sprayed across the room. Dharma screamed and collapsed to the floor. Before Dharma could even catch his breath, Cho lunged at him like a predator. Cho pinned Dharma's head down with one hand, and with the other, aimed the jagged, broken bottleneck straight at Dharma's eyeball. In the psychopath logic of Cho Won-pil, if you poke a hole in my money collection, I'll poke a hole in your eye. Watching the jagged glass inch millimeters from his pupil, Dharma's resolve completely shattered. He opened his mouth to sell Ma out. "Hyung, the money, it was the rookie." But before he could finish the sentence, a large hand shot out and gripped the broken glass in its bare palm. It was Ma Seok-do. His eyes cold, he stated calmly, "That's enough, so the kid made a mistake. Are you trying to kill him over it? Since the problem is already here, fixing the deficit is what matters. Killing him won't get your money back. Give us a few days, I'll personally cover the debt. Listening nearby, Dharma gulped, thinking Ma had a death wish talking to Cho like that. And sure enough, the next one to get hit was Ma. Cho drove a heavy punch straight into his face. Cho turned into a wild beast, unleashing a furious barrage of heavy blows on Ma Sokdo. Surprisingly, Ma just stood there, absorbing every single brutal hit without raising a hand to fight back. After finishing his assault, Cho shook the blood off his knuckles and suddenly threw his head back in roaring laughter. I've been in this business a long time. I never misjudge people. You can tell exactly what a man is worth just by looking in his eyes. You're the kid So Sanyat brought in, right? Where the hell did he dig you up? Your eyes? They practically scream, I can make you a lot of money. In a great mood now, Cho declared he'd let the money issue slide. In exchange, Ma and his crew were taking over a new business. The job Cho handed them was an illegal used car leasing racket. The hustle was simple. Rent luxury cars long-term in bulk, then illegally sublease them short-term to walk-ins, pocketing the massive markup. The weekly rate was 500,000 won, a bit over 2,000 RMB. In the rental world, it was absolute daylight robbery. But the crazy part was, the demand for this scam was through the roof. Ma's job was simply dropping off the cars and collecting them later. And their clientele? Exclusively nightlife regulars and insecure losers obsessed with flexing wealth they didn't have. Outside the car, 3 of those exact flexing losers were crowding Pai Yu, obnoxiously demanding 100,000 won discount. Seeing Pai Yu was just a kid alone, they showed their true colors, cursing and demanding the keys. It's an illegal rental anyway. You can't go to the cops, just drop the damn price. Ma Sokdo sat inside the car, quietly listening to the dogs barking outside. He looked down at the heavy set of car keys in his hand, his eyes darkening as he thought for a second. Outside, the lead thug was still bragging loudly about being a big shot in the Gangnam area. He didn't even get to finish his sentence before his face contorted into a mask of sudden, explosive agony. Crash! Ma Sokdo smashed his fist straight through the car window and hurled the heavy keys through the hole, nailing the thug like a bullet. The thug screamed and was launched backward, landing so awkwardly it looked like he just took a lethal cheap shot right up the tailbone. Ma casually pushed the door open and stepped out. He glared at the remaining 2. So, do you want to pay up and rent the car now? Or get your asses beat and then cry while you rent it? Oh, and the broken window? That's extra. The more time Ma spent dealing with this kind of trash, the less his police conscience bothered him. The clientele was a freak show, bottom-tier thugs renting luxury rides to look like bosses in front of their goons. Sleazy corporate managers renting flashy cars to take escorts to karaoke bars, and absolute low-life predators who used the cars to pick up and manipulate naive young girls at nightclubs. Meanwhile, the old hustler Dharma was secretly pulling Weasel aside, asking if he wanted to make some off-the-books cash. They agreed to secretly hike the rental price by 50,000 won and pocket the difference. Weasel's eyes lit up with greed as he nodded excitedly. Sure enough, when the next customer was hit with a sudden price hike, the man frowned and complained. What kind of business just raises the price on the spot? Dharma thought the guy was trying to dodge the bill. He rolled up his sleeves, ready to call Man 2 over to teach him a lesson. But to his shock, the man didn't argue further and just handed over the cash. Dharma was completely stunned. He never expected the guy to pay up so easily. When Dharma looked down, he realized the guy had paid entirely in high-denomination bills. It turned out that among all their clients, the most generous were the Apgujeong rich kids. Simply put, the spoiled second-generation brats from Seoul's wealthiest district who lived off their parents' money and partied every night. These rich kids used the service constantly, so they could flex a different luxury car at the club every week. They were, without a doubt, the fattest cash cows. Time flew by, and soon it was dusk. Ma Sokdo and Pai Yu were parked under a secluded overpass, taking a quick break. Ma casually asked, "How much of the quota is left?" Pai Yu checked the books and said there was only 1 drop-off remaining. Hearing that, Ma decided to grab a quick nap and told Pai Yu to wake him in 10 minutes. He reached down for the lever to recline his seat, hoping to get comfortable. But right then, a strange, unnatural sound broke the silence in the car. Ma Sokdo looked down and realized his hand hadn't grabbed the lever. Instead, his fingers were wrapped around something incredibly bizarre. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Cho Won-pil was being stopped by one of his men, who admitted he still felt uneasy about sending Dharma and the others. Sure, those idiots were good at squeezing payments out of people, but was it not too dangerous to make them handle that job? Cho Won-pil shot back with a question of his own. When you say dangerous, do you mean dangerous for me, or dangerous for Dharma's side? The subordinate answered quietly that it was dangerous for both, especially if word ever reached Jo Tae-se. If that happened, everybody's head would roll. That was exactly why only the 2 of them knew about this business from the beginning. And because of that, it was even more important to cut off the tail cleanly before those idiots ever got the chance to lose their heads. In Cho Won-pil's eyes, the money those guys collected was nothing but pocket change. But to Dharma's crew, it was more than enough to make them work like dogs. Letting them handle a dangerous, dirty job like this was perfect. If something went wrong, he only had to chop off the tail and be done with it. After saying that, Cho Won-pil slowly let out a breath and started muttering about their boss, Jo Tae-se, saying that bastard was impossible to understand. Why ignore something this good? At the same time, Ma Seok-do stared at what he had found and froze, because he had finally realized that Cho Won-pil was completely insane. On the surface, it looked like a car rental business, but behind the curtain, it was drug transportation. In that instant, everything clicked, and he finally understood why that so-called rental business was booming so hard. The Apgujeong rich kids were not constantly switching luxury cars just to show off. They were using the rental service as a cover for drug deals. And those rich second-generation brats changing luxury cars every week were the real clients behind the line. Which meant that every time Ma Seok-do had been delivering rental cars, he had also been delivering drugs without even knowing it. If Lee San-young ever found out about this, Ma Seok-do was finished. So before that could happen, he had to take Cho Won-pil down himself. With that thought, he immediately asked Pai-yu where Dharma was. Pai-yu answered that Dharma was in the middle of a deal and could not be reached. But the moment Ma Seok-do heard that Dharma's delivery zone was Apgujeong, his heart sank. That meant the idiot probably did not even realize he was transporting drugs. By the time the two of them finally found Dharma's car, night had already fallen completely. Ma Seok-do yanked open the back door and saw Dharma inside, beaten so badly his face was swollen beyond recognition. He immediately demanded to know what was going on, but Dharma hesitated for a long time before finally forcing out 3 words, Poppy Gang. The instant he heard that name, Ma Seok-do finally realized that he was already surrounded on all sides by a sea of underlings. Then, a leader stepped out from the crowd and mocked him, saying that even gangsters ought to have some basic professional ethics. How dare they come for the rice bowl of people already doing drug business? The man was none other than Poppy Gang's action team captain, Shin Seung-hui. With a sneer, he asked if they were high out of their minds or just forgot to take their medicine. And if their stomachs were still empty, maybe they should eat something before they died. How about a knife meal? The scene then shifted back to Cho Won-pil, who was explaining Poppy Gang to his subordinate. Their main business was drug dealing, and if they heard that someone was messing with that trade on their turf, they would never let it go. And once the situation blew up, the news would eventually reach Poppy Gang's boss, and from there even Jo Tae-se would hear about it. When that happened, Cho Won-pil could simply say that Dharma and the others had acted on their own. The subordinate immediately caught the meaning behind those words. So he was planning to throw Dharma and the others out as scapegoats? Cho Won-pil answered without hesitation. Of course, if he kept protecting them, Jo Tae-se would eventually learn that he himself had also been involved in drug trafficking. He had already squeezed enough use out of Dharma's group. This was the perfect time to cut off the tail. And he did not even need to do the cutting himself. Poppy Gang would do it for him. At most, he could let them walk away with a little of the product as payment for the trouble. And now, facing the enemies closing in around him, Ma Seok-do finally understood the whole scheme. After using them to the absolute limit, Cho Won-pil was now planning to erase them with Poppy Gang's hands the moment there was a risk of the matter reaching people higher up. At that thought, Ma Seok-do's eyes turned cold. That lunatic Cho Won-pil had actually dragged a Republic of Korea police officer into something like this, and he slowly clenched his fist with only one thought left in his mind. He was going to kill that bastard himself. Just moments ago, Ma Seok-do had been surrounded by the entire Poppy Gang, but he did not panic at all. He simply pulled off his belt, wrapped it around his hand, clenched his fist, and got ready to really stretch his muscles. The first thug leaped in first, swinging a club straight down at him, but Ma Seok-do bent his knees slightly and drove a straight punch right into the man's stomach. And before he even had time to pull his fist back, a second man was already rushing in with a knife. Ma Seok-do turned his body aside, caught the man's arm in one smooth motion, and hurled him hard into the car window beside them. Before he could even fully turn around, the third attacker was already in his face, and Ma Seok-do casually grabbed a book and smashed it straight into the guy's head. Then, in the very next second, a blade flashed coldly through the air as another thug came down at his neck with a knife. The blade was just about to touch flesh when Ma Seok-do snapped his hand up, the belt wrapped around his fist barely but firmly stopping the strike. And when the man pulled the knife back and instantly slashed again from the side, Ma Seok-do arched his body backward in a sharp, almost absurdly graceful curve and dodged it by a hair. He even had the spare breath to remind the guy that, under Article 70 of the Firearms, Explosives, and Blades Control Act, carrying a blade without permission could get him up to 10 years in prison. The moment he said it, the fist wrapped in that belt crashed down hard onto the blade. and the force was so monstrous that it drove the knife straight into the car body. While the other man was still desperately trying to yank it back out, Ma Seok-do grabbed him by the head and smashed it brutally into the side of the vehicle. The impact was horrifying. The man's face was practically stamped into the metal, leaving behind a deep, clear dent. Seeing that, Shin Sang-wi immediately roared for all his men to rush him at once, and 3 underlings moved on command, lunging straight at Ma Seok-do together. But Ma Seok-do yanked the car door open to block them, then rammed forward with the force of a charging bull, sending all 3 flying with a single shoulder smash. Even the car door was twisted out of shape by the impact. Just as Ma Seok-do confidently shouted for the next one to come, 2 arms suddenly locked around him from behind before he could finish the sentence. It turned out the thug who had disappeared earlier had circled behind him and wrapped him up tight. The others instantly swarmed in as well, taking advantage of the hold to pin him down on the spot. Then one of them raised an axe high and brought it down toward Ma Seok-do's head. But at the last possible second, a figure came flying in. Dharma's flying kick blasted that man away. Before Ma Seok-do could even process what happened, Dharma had already landed cleanly and tossed out a line. "Don't worry, I've got a grudge too." As for why Dharma had suddenly shown up, that was thanks to Pai Yu. In the chaos, he had managed to untie everyone, and now it was time for those bastards to pay. The men who had been fighting among themselves just moments ago were now more united than ever. Only at this moment did the rule written in their code finally reveal its real meaning. No words, not even eye contact was needed. Facing the Poppy Gang, the 4 of them stepped up at once and stood in front, shielding Ma Seok-do behind them. Starting with Dharma, the guy was normally the textbook kind of coward who bullied the weak and feared the strong, bowing and scraping before superiors while throwing his weight around in front of newcomers. And yet, a guy like that had been the very first one to jump in and take a blade for him. Deep down, Ma Seok-do could not help asking himself what kind of person Dharma really was. According to the story, when Dharma drew lots as a kid, what he pulled was a hammer, and his parents had once hoped he would grow up to become a proper builder. But a man's life is not something his parents get to decide. That hammer never ended up building walls. Instead, it became the thing he used to crack people over the head, and the way he swung it looked like Daruma pounding a wooden fish. So over time, Dharma became the nickname that stuck. Then there was Weasel. If Dharma was the kind of brute who only knew how to speak with his fists, then Weasel was a completely different breed. He was tall, but wiry, vicious by nature and dark at heart, and nobody ever talked about him like he was some powerhouse. But everyone who had fought him always ended up saying the same thing. Nobody wanted to fight that bastard, because he always targeted weak points and fought dirty, striking like a predator lurking in the dark. And that was exactly where the name Weasel came from. As for Manto, the man who looked a little slow and dull on the surface, he had once been the great hope of the Gyeongsan wrestling scene, a man known as the super rookie of Halagi. In street fighting, where a single mistake could get someone killed, why was a guy with that kind of lethal skill called Manto? The answer was so simple, it was almost ridiculous. He just really loved eating steamed buns. If Dharma and the others had actually been weak from the very start, they never would have even made it in as Hwang Gang trainee members. The only reason they looked weak now was because the man standing in front of them, Ma Seok-do, was simply too strong. Before long, Shin Sang-wi ended up buried in the dirt, with only his head left sticking out. Faced with Ma Seok-do's questioning, he hurriedly tried to explain, saying he had honestly had no idea they were Hwanggang people. Otherwise, even with 100 extra guts, he never would have dared touch them. But he also genuinely did not understand when Hwanggang had started dealing in drugs. From what he had heard, their boss hated that line of work more than anything. Hwanggang had inherited Bomchongang's pure bloodline, and if someone inside the gang dirtied themselves with that kind of business, they died. Hearing that, even Dharma cut in, saying they themselves did not know what the hell had happened. They had been dragged into this drug trafficking mess without even understanding it, and he urged Ma Seok-do to report it upward immediately. Forget the Poppy Gang attack for now. The drug issue alone had to be clarified. But the moment those words left his mouth, Ma Seok-do grabbed him hard in the crotch and warned him under his breath to think before he spoke with this many people listening. Ma Seok-do understood better than anyone that he wanted to blow the whole thing open immediately. But if he did that now, the first people to go down would be them. This was absolutely not the time to move recklessly, so he told everyone there that everything that had happened today, whether on their side or Poppy Gang's side, was to be treated as if it had never happened. Hearing that, everyone there looked completely confused, but Ma Seok-do gave no explanation and simply told them all to go home. Whether it was Poppy Gang or Dharma's group, nobody could tell what Ma Seok-do was really planning in that moment. Before long, The group returned to Hongang's base. Dharma stepped forward and reported to Cho Won-pil that they had completed today's quota, then asked whether they could head back and rest. The 5 of them stood in a row, waiting for Cho Won-pil, who was resting with an eye mask on, to speak. When Cho Won-pil questioned them, Dharma insisted that nothing at all had happened today. Pai Yu, however, quietly glanced toward Ma Suk-do beside him. He simply could not understand why, ever since the clash with Poppy Game, boss Ma Suk-do had kept his mouth shut. After hearing the report, Cho Won-pil only waved a hand and told them to clean up and go back to rest. But Ma Suk-do kept staring at Cho Won-pil with a fierce tension in his eyes. To be honest, what he wanted most right then was to storm forward and beat the hell out of him. But reason eventually suppressed the urge. Ma Suk-do knew perfectly well that moving now would bring more harm than good. The brute force trick he used on Dharma wouldn't work on Cho Won-pil. A mindless attack on a captain would only make Big Boss Joe Taisei lose all trust in him. If that happened, forget about a promotion. He probably wouldn't even survive in the Huang Gang, even if he blew the whistle on Cho Won-pil's drug trafficking. There was no evidence Joe Taisei would believe a mere trainee. If Cho bit back, Ma Suk-do would absolutely be the one getting stuffed into a barrel and dropped in the ocean. While Ma was deep in thought, a voice shattered the silence in the room. Seo Sang-up had arrived unannounced. He glared at Cho and demanded, "Why the hell aren't you answering my calls?" Seo tossed a stack of freshly printed business cards onto the table. He mocked, "If we're trying to run a legitimate company, the least we can do is print some cards. Oh, and the insurance payout for that idiot you ran over? I took care of it." Watching from the sidelines, Ma internally scoffed. "Long time no see, Seo. You practically begged me to join, and now you throw me to the bottom as grunt labor." Despite Seo's updates, Cho Won-pil, still wearing his sleep mask, lay dead still on the sofa, without uttering a single word. Seo's eyes locked onto Cho's face, his expression growing darker by the second. The air in the room froze solid. The 2 men engaged in a silent standoff, neither willing to yield. Finally, Seo broke the silence to save his own face. He forced a painfully stiff smile. "Right, keep sleeping, I'm leading." But the second he turned his back, the smile vanished. Being completely ignored in front of the grunts made his blood boil. From the corner of the room, Ma Suk-do observed the entire power struggle. Seo stormed outside, squatted on the ground, and started cursing furiously. For a high-ranking executive to be humiliated like that was a massive blow to his pride. To make matters worse, even his cheap lighter seemed to be mocking him, refusing to spark no matter how hard he flicked it. Just then, a hand reached out, offering a lit lighter right in front of his face. Click. Ma Suk-do squatted next to him with a friendly greeting. Taking a drag from his cigarette, Seo sighed and started venting. Seo tried to smooth things over. "Even Cho Won-pil praised your work. Honestly, I feel bad bringing you in just to start you as a trainee. Be patient, I'll find a way to pull you into my inner circle soon." Playing the game perfectly, Ma fed Seo a few smooth compliments, expertly stroking the executive's bruised ego. Then, Ma shifted gears. He narrowed his eyes and asked quietly, "Seojeon Cho Won-pil is a real pain in your ass, isn't he?" Before Seo could answer, Ma leaned in closer, dropping his voice to a whisper. "I actually have a plan that is just as perfect as my face. What do you say? Want me to help you flip the Huang Gang completely upside down?" The scene cuts. Meanwhile, Cho Won-pil was sprawled out on a massive waterbed, sleeping off a hangover. For context, this action captain was known on the streets as the Golden Ghost. To him, only 2 things in the world had value: money and the corpses of anyone who stood between him and his money. Soon, he groggily got up to relieve himself. The stream hit the toilet with the force of a raging waterfall. He looked down and smiled with twisted pride. "Even from this far back, my aim is flawless." He raised an eyebrow, thinking the day was already off to a fantastic start. Zipping up and walking back into the room, 2 scantily clad women had already served him a bowl of hot ramen. Without him even asking, the noodles were cooked slightly firm, exactly the way he liked them. But what really made him feel like the chosen one today was a rare discovery. There were 2 pieces of dried kelp hidden in the ramen pack. Listening to the sweet, submissive giggles of the women beside him, Cho chewed the kelp. Absolutely convinced that today was his lucky day to make a fortune, he casually grabbed the cup sitting nearby and threw back everything inside in one gulp. But in the very next second, he spat it all right back out, only then realizing the cup had been filled with alcohol. He instantly grumbled that he still had work to do later, but one of the women only laughed and told him that before doing work, he ought to loosen his body up first. If he left just like that, the ladies would be heartbroken. And yet, for some reason, a strange thought rose in Cho Won-pil's mind. He could not shake the feeling that his luck today had been insanely good. The scene shifted again, and the sky had already turned dim. Near the container docks, Cho Won-pil stood by the shoreline with another man, both holding fishing rods as if they were waiting to reel something in from the water. Cho Won-pil could not help cursing under his breath. They had supposedly come to pick up a shipment, and now they were stuck out here like idiots fishing for it. The other man looked just as helpless and said the sellers insisted on doing it this way, so there was nothing he could do. Before long, a black briefcase was dragged up out of the water, and when the man opened it, it was packed full of white powder. No explanation was needed. It was drugs. As he skillfully checked the purity, he warned Cho Won-pil that a drug deal like this was something only a handful of people should know about. The more people he dragged in for no reason, the longer the tale became, unless he really wanted Joe Taisei to wipe them all out in one sweep. Once he confirms the product was clean, he signaled Cho Won-pil to pay up. But the very moment he passed the goods over and prepared to make it a clean handoff, a shout rang out from the distance, ordering them not to move. A group of customs officers came rushing in on bikes, demanding that they cooperate with an inspection. The sight instantly rattled the man, and he hurriedly asked Cho Won-pil what they should do now. But Cho Won-pil only told him to secure the product first. The man then asked what they should do with the money, wondering whether they should just dump it and run, since they already had the goods. Cho Won-pil blew up on the spot, snapping that throwing the money away would only make it obvious they were trafficking drugs. Both the cash and the product had to be kept. Not a single bit could be lost. By then, the first light of dawn was already beginning to show over the water as the two men fled in total disarray from the customs officers chasing them. While running, Cho Won-pil started calculating aloud that if customs had already shown up, then the seller's side had probably already been compromised. The other man had not even processed that yet, before Cho Won-pil cursed at him and said, "How do you not get it? If they shook the people behind them, then this whole shipment would basically become free product." Then, he demanded the car keys from the man, saying he would drive from here. But the instant the keys touched his hand, Cho Won-pil's face changed, and he coldly told the man to stay calm and wait. He would have his underlings bail him out with money later. Before the other man could react, Cho Won-pil's fist was already smashing into his face, and, since the guy loved talking so much, Cho Won-pil figured he could go recover in a jail cell for a while. Once things settled down, he said he would come get him. By the time customs arrived at the spot, all they found was the unconscious man, while Cho Won-pil remained hidden behind a shipping container, watching the whole thing with a cold gaze. Once he confirmed it was safe, he turned, got into the car, and tore off with one hard slam on the accelerator. On the road, Cho Won-pil let out a long breath, thinking how close he had come to getting caught. If he had gone in this time, he might never have come back out. Still, why had customs suddenly appeared? Something like that had never happened before. He could not figure it out, but he also could not be bothered dwelling on it. No matter how he looked at it, the goods were safe, the money was in hand, and the day had turned out just about perfect. Thinking that, the corner of Cho Won-pil's mouth lifted. His luck really had been absurdly good today. But before he could enjoy it for long, he suddenly noticed that the fuel gauge was almost empty. Even so, he only froze for a second, then curled his lips into a grin. So what? Today was his lucky day, after all. Before long, Cho Won-pil drove up to Chunrom gas station, parked the car, and told the attendant to fill it all the way up. While the tank was being filled, his mind was still turning over what had just happened. If customs had suddenly stepped in, then the old transaction route was probably exposed, which meant he would have to slowly start lining up new clients. Just as he was thinking that, a strange sound suddenly snapped him out of it, and the attendant apologized awkwardly, saying he had accidentally filled the car with diesel instead of gasoline. Cho Won-pil's face darkened immediately. He got out of the car, stared down at the flustered attendant, and demanded to know what the hell was supposed to happen to the car now. It was only because he happened to be in a decent mood today. Otherwise, that idiot would already have been finished. But right as he was tearing into the guy, two vans rolled into the gas station from opposite ends and neatly blocked both exits. Cho Won-pil looked at the scene and froze for a beat. And then the doors opened and a man stepped out with a smile, saying it was nice to see him. As that man led a whole pack of thugs into position and sealed off the area, Cho Won-pil finally recognized him. It was Shin Sang-ui of Poppy Game. Cho Won-pil was clearly caught off guard. But Shin Sang-ui did not bother going in circles. He bluntly said that a few days ago, he had had a little trouble with some of Cho Won-pil's subordinates, and only later found out those men had also been kept in the dark. The moment he heard that, Cho Won-pil understood they were talking about Dharma's crew. Shin Sang-ui let out a cold laugh and said there was no point wasting words now. Better to clean this up quickly. Poppy Gang was not about to spare him just because he belonged to Huang Gang, and his men were already prepared. With that, Shin Sang-ui gave up all pretense and directly ordered them to move. The scene then cut back to Ma Suk-do's earlier conversation with So Sun-up, and after laying out the whole story of how Cho Won-pil had set them up to get dragged into drug trafficking, and how he planned to use Poppy Gang's hands to wipe them out, Ma Suk-do smoothly played the emotional angle, saying there was no way he would dare lie to his boss. After all, So Sun-up was the one who had personally pulled him up, yet Cho Won-pil was trying to drag him down into the mud instead. Was that not the same as disrespecting So Sun-up outright? Hearing that, So Sang-up's expression darkened on the spot, and he even said that he would personally report Cho Won-pil's drug dealing to Jo Tae-se. But Ma Suk-do pointed out that words alone might not be enough for the higher-ups to believe him, because Cho Won-pil was one of Jo Tae-se's most trusted action team captains. If they mishandled this, not only would they fail to bring him down, they might burn themselves too. So instead of reporting him recklessly, it was better to blow the whole situation wide open. Seeing that So Sang-up had clearly taken the bait, Ma Suk-do finally began laying out his plan, explaining that Poppy Gang had already more or less figured out how Cho Won-pil handled his transactions. Since the man always moved with only a few people, there was a very high chance he would show up in person at the next deal. And when that happened, Poppy Gang members disguised as customs officers would hit the scene. The key was not to truly capture him, but to stage it so it looked like they almost had him, then deliberately let him escape. And while buying time in the confusion, they would quietly siphon the fuel out of his car, leaving him with no choice but to head for the nearest gas station, and that gas station would be the real place to finish Cho Won-pil off. While the finer details of how to close the trap afterward, Ma Suk-do said, could be explained slowly later. After hearing all that, Seo Sun-up became suspicious, and asked whether Ma Suk-do had some personal grudge against Cho Won-pil. Otherwise, why insist on pushing things this far? Ma Suk-do only smiled slyly and said it was all for the organization. So Sun-up pressed further and asked how exactly he planned to settle it in the end, but Ma Suk-do did not answer directly. He simply raised the lighter in his hand, and the instant the flame flickered to life, the meaning was clear without words. In the end, every last piece of evidence would be burned away. But for all how perfect the plan looked, it hid one fatal flaw. Every last one of them had underestimated one thing: Cho Won-pil's actual combat strength. Shin Sang-ui had only just barked the order to break his legs first, when the attendant who had been posing as a gas station worker lunged in from behind, before the sentence was even finished. But in the next instant, Cho Won-pil spun around, snatched up the fuel nozzle beside him, and blasted the man with gasoline in one precise spray. Then, with the slightest flick of his fingers, he sent the cigarette butt in his hand flying. And in that instant, the fire exploded outward, flames raging wild as they swallowed everything around them. Everyone there froze, stunned by the sudden blast of fire. Only then did Cho Won-pil fully realize that the ones behind this setup were Ma Suk-do and So Sun-up. Still, no matter how he looked at it, this time he really had underestimated them. Seeing that, Shin Sang-ui immediately shouted for his men to take him down now. But the very next second, he suddenly noticed that gasoline had already spread all around his feet, while the thug engulfed in flames was still screaming in agony on the ground. Cho Won-pil did not bother listening to any more of it. He simply kicked the burning man down hard. The gasoline on the ground caught at once, and the flames tore across the floor so fast that the nearby thugs were forced to stumble backward. Standing there, between the firelight and the smoke, Cho Won-pil coldly said that when he ate crucian carp cakes, he always had a habit of starting from the tail first, because the head, the best part, was something meant to be savored last. So today would be no different. He would start from the tail and chew the Poppy Gang apart piece by piece, making them understand exactly what the name Cho Won-pil meant. In the next instant, the first wave of thugs came roaring toward him. But Cho Won-pil stayed perfectly calm, grabbed the fuel nozzle again, and sprayed it straight at them. Right after that, he snatched up a burning wooden stick from nearby and brought it crashing down on the man in front, hitting hard enough to flatten him on the spot. He swung the stick sideways next and smashed it across the face of a bald thug. Cho Won-pil moved with shocking speed and agility. Before the other two thugs could even react, he was already on top of him. And with the crack of the stick snapping in half, another man dropped to the ground. Someone shouted in panic, warning the others that his weapon had broken. But before the words had even fully landed, Cho Won-pil had already snatched up the broken half he had flung away earlier. Holding a jagged piece of wood in each hand, he curled his lips into an amused grin and said that just swinging sticks around was a little too boring, was it not? Then, he stepped forward in one clean motion. And before the thug in front of him even understood what had happened, he had already been stabbed and dropped screaming to the ground. Cho Won-pil burst out from the fire in the crowd like a beast gone mad, unstoppable. But, in the very next second, a blast of thick white smoke came rushing straight at Cho Won-pil's face, swallowing his vision whole. Shin Sang-ui had grabbed a fire extinguisher and was unloading it right at him, sneering, "Since you love white powder so much, you might as well choke on all of it." Seeing Cho Won-pil finally get pinned down for a moment, Shin Sang-ui could barely contain his delight, and immediately turned to yell at his men, "Break one of his legs while we have the chance." But the next second, the smile on his face froze solid, because all the underlings behind him were already sprawled across the ground in a complete mess. Before Shin Sang-ui could even process what had happened, a fuel hose had been jammed straight into his mouth. Then Cho Won-pil came lunging in and slammed him to the ground, pinning him down with his full weight. Leaning in close, he coldly demanded, "When exactly did Poppy Gang start working with So Sun-up? And how the hell did he have the nerve to send trash like you into this mess?" As he spoke, he pressed the trigger, and gasoline began pouring in thick streams down Shin Sang-ui's throat. The more Cho Won-pil thought about it, the more amused he became. He had not expected that office rat So Sun-up to actually have some nerve. If all So Sang-up had done was find out about the drug trafficking, then he could have simply gone and told Jo Tae-se like a good little dog. But now, Cho Won-pil understood exactly why So Sun-up had wanted to blow things up this far. Because Jo Tae-se never would have believed them, so the plan had been to finish him right there on the spot instead. Cho Won-pil admitted that this time he really had underestimated So Sang-up, but the man still lacked any real sense if he thought a few dozen punks were enough to bring him down. The scene shifted again, this time to the territory So Sang-up managed. He was standing there in a foul mood, complaining, "Why did that earlier batch of girls come back again when everything was already arranged?" While they weakly protested, "But we're only 21. So Sang-up let out a tired sigh, wondering why only this kind of crap kept landing on him today. At the same time, he was quietly calculating the situation in his head. According to the plan, Cho Won-pil should have already been taken out by Poppy Gang by now. Yet there was still no word at all, and at that thought, he instinctively covered his mouth. Then, unable to hold it in any longer, So Sang-up burst out laughing, muttering, "Serves the bastard right. He should have gotten what was coming to him long ago." In So Sang-up's mind, there was only one reason Cho Won-pil had ended up like this. He had been stupid enough to stand against him. But, before the words had even fully left his mouth, a shadow silently rose behind him. And, in the next instant, a fist smashed through the glass, while a hand clamped hard around his throat from behind. So Sang-up's smile froze on the spot as he finally realized that the lunatic Cho Won-pil was still alive. Cho Won-pil coldly told him, "The moment you found out about the drug trafficking, whether you believed it or not, you should have immediately gone to Jo Tae-se. But instead, you chose to cozy up to Poppy Gang. In the end, it all came down to one thing. You wanted me dead so badly that you tried to use someone else's hands to do it, leaving your own hands clean, while I died as a secret trafficker, killed by a rival gang. Now, it was obvious that what had lured him here was So Sang-up's own smug little scheme. Too bad that in the end, the one who would be caught red-handed for secret drug dealing would be So Sang-up himself, while Cho Won-pil would be nothing more than a man who had fought back in self-defense after being attacked by Poppy Gang. As for snapping this neck first and filing the report later, there was no rush. Even with the veins in his neck bulging from being choked, So Sang-up still managed to force out a smile and say, "I recorded every word you just said." That made Cho Won-pil pause for the first time. Following So Sang-up's line of sight, he finally noticed Ma Seok-do standing in the distance, having watched the entire scene unfold. Ma Seok-do slowly stepped forward. He had known from the start that useless trash like Poppy Gang could never truly bring Cho Won-pil down. But, as long as this madman got to taste what it felt like to be stabbed in the back himself, that was already enough. Hearing that, Cho Won-pil sneered and asked if he had ever read a book in his life, and So Sang-up struggled to correct him, saying, "That's called putting yourself in someone else's shoes." Cho Won-pil openly admitted, "Sure, this time I slipped up. Ma Sekto's brain really does match that face of his. But, at the end of the day, you're still just a low-level punk. So what exactly do you think you can do? Do you really believe you can catch me? As long as I clean the two of you up right here and now, everything will be buried for good. Which only proves one thing. Today really is still my lucky day. The sun has already gone down. And just like in a lucky day, the story has reached its ending. There's no comeback left for you now. But Ma Sekto only smiled and told him, no, this is nowhere near the ending yet. The real ending is only just beginning now. Then, he said, he was about to retell the story for Cho Won-pil. Cho Won-pil's Unlucky Day. Adapted by Ma Sekto. On October 13, 1990, then-President Roh Tae-woo of Korea delivered a special address and officially declared a war on crime. It was a nationwide anti-gang crackdown on a scale Korea had never seen before, aimed at crushing the organized crime groups that had grown increasingly rampant alongside the country's rapid economic boom. And after that declaration, even though countless major gang figures were dragged down, including the nationwide violent syndicate Bongchon Gang, spring never truly came. Once the old order collapsed, the fierce dogs that once had masters lost their place and turned into rabid strays. At that moment, the bloody man on the ground was still screaming, asking, "Do you even know who I am?" But the younger Cho Won-pil did not care in the slightest. He swung a steel pipe down without hesitation and said, "Nobody cares anymore about who you used to be. You're nothing but wild dogs. So what if you really came from Bongchon Gang? Now you're just trash, not even worth arresting anymore." With that, Cho Won-pil pulled a knife and stabbed the man several times, then spun and drove another slash into the enemy, trying to ambush him from behind. Before long, every underling at the scene had already gone down, leaving only the leader slumped on the ground, trembling as he asked, "We have no real grudge against each other. Why did it have to end like this?" Cho Won-pil calmly replied, "I only wanted to confirm what kind of people were still left standing after the war on crime, and the answer is simple: cowards or third-rate punks." But that was only the scare line. The real reason he had come there that day was to steal the bail money they had prepared to get Boss Seok out. The man could barely believe it. For that little bit of bail money, you slaughtered this many people? But before he could say anything else, Cho Won-pil grabbed him by the mouth and told him, "A pack of stray mutts without an owner still wants to act like fierce hunting dogs. If you really want to live, then keep barking, bark louder. Maybe your master will actually hear you and come." After finishing the job, Cho Won-pil headed downstairs. But the moment he stepped outside, he found someone already waiting for him. The man called his name and said he wanted a word. That man was Park Hwi-ju, Hwangang's second-in-command and one of its top leaders. Cho Won-pil looked him up and down, then let out a cold laugh, clearly assuming the man had come to get his share of the bail money too. To him, Park Hwi-ju looked like the kind of nobody who had crawled out of some back alley no one had ever heard of. Whether it was cops or Bongchon Gang, Cho Won-pil feared none of them. Anyone who dared touch his money was going to get far worse than just a hole punched in their body. But Park Hwi-ju simply spoke as if none of that mattered, saying, "Someone with your nerve and guts might actually be useful to us." Park Hwi-ju turned toward the car behind him and called out, "Boss." A moment later, the door opened and a man stepped out at an unhurried pace. In that man's eyes, if you wanted to tame a wild dog that ran loose after losing its master, the first thing you did was break its teeth. And that man was Jo Tae-se, the future crime king and head of Hwanggang. Tonight, he wanted to see for himself whether this bastard was even worth the one punch she had prepared for him. Only then did Cho Won-pil finally understand that they were not there to steal his money. They were there to recruit him. His grip tightened around the knife in his hand, and part of him thought that worked out fine, because he happened to need a car right now anyway. In the next instant, Cho Won-pil lunged straight at Jo Tae-se, but Jo Tae-se did not even bother dodging. He simply threw one clean punch right into the attack coming at him. And Cho Won-pil dropped on the spot. As Jo Tae-se wiped the blood off his hand, he looked down at him and coldly said, "From this moment on, you belong to Hwanggang. This organization will rise again and take control of Korea's underworld. Seoul is a masterless lamb now, and Hwanggang is going to build its own kingdom on top of it. From that day forward, paradise will be Hwanggang itself. And there is only one rule anyone needs to remember on this turf. There are no other rules. I, Jo Tae-se, am the rule." In the end, working for Hwanggang was not all that complicated. Make money when it was time to make money, and when the moment came, raise your weapon for Hwanggang. Back in the present, the fight between Ma Sekto and Cho Won-pil had already reached a boiling point, with Cho Won-pil stabbing again and again with the blade in his hand, leaving Ma Seok-do no choice but to keep ducking and slipping out of the way. But the instant Cho Won-pil pulled the knife back, Ma Seok-do seized the opening and launched a brutal straight punch. Cho Won-pil got his guard up in time, but the impact still blasted him backward and slammed him hard into the car behind him. That single punch dragged up memories Cho Won-pil hated remembering. More than anything, he hated boxers. He hated them to the bone. But Ma Seok-do gave him no room to breathe. The second punch came crashing in right after the first. And Cho Won-pil instantly snatched up a car side mirror from nearby and smashed it hard into Ma Seok-do. By the time Ma Seok-do reset his footing and looked up again, Cho Won-pil had already disappeared into the maze of tightly packed cars around them. Then, Cho Won-pil's voice echoed out from somewhere inside the rows of vehicles, mocking Ma Seok-do. "You would never understand. Years ago, I really did lose to a boxer. But after that defeat, I replayed the entire fight over and over, breaking it down in my head countless times, waiting for the day I could finally win it back. And as fate would have it, the man standing in front of me now is another damn boxer." While he spoke, he had already slipped silently behind Ma Seok-do, sneering, "This is exactly why I said today is my lucky day." In the next instant, the blade came plunging down from above. But Ma Seok-do reacted fast and dropped backward out of the line, only for the counterpunch he threw in response to smash into the side of a nearby car instead. And at that exact moment, he finally understood what Cho Won-pil was trying to do. Cho Won-pil had deliberately used his size advantage to herd Ma Seok-do into a cramped stretch between the cars. At that point, dodging left or right was already hard enough. And with the space that tight, Ma Seok-do could barely even turn properly, let alone throw his punches cleanly. On top of that, Cho Won-pil had a knife in hand. In close-range grappling, Ma Seok-do was being restricted at every turn. He had fallen straight into the trap Cho Won-pil wanted. Cho Won-pil gave him no time to think. The attacks came in relentless waves, one after another. And with the space so cramped, every counter Ma Seok-do tried to throw was limited by the environment. Cho Won-pil slipped past them with ease, while Ma Seok-do's fists kept crashing into the windows of the cars beside them. But in the tiny gap between one stab and the next, Ma Seok-do suddenly drove a brutal punch forward and smashed Cho Won-pil's knife arm straight into the car window. Then he did something so strange that even Cho Won-pil paused. He started smashing every car window around them with both fists. Watching that, Cho Won-pil let out a mocking laugh. To him, Ma Seok-do looked like he was finally being pushed into pure frustration. Because Cho Won-pil still had the knife, and in close quarters Ma Seok-do could not properly fight back. The space was too tight for him to do anything meaningful, so all he could do now, apparently, was take his anger out on the glass, even smashing away the very windows that could have helped intimidate people. And Cho Won-pil wanted to see exactly what kind of struggle the man still thought he had left. As he slowly closed the distance, he said, "While my boss and I don't share the same values on everything, there is one point we agree on. The bastard who stabs last has to die." But at the very instant he raised the knife to bring it down, a violent shock slammed straight into his right eye. Ma Seok-do's punch had exploded into him and sent him flying backward, and half of Cho Won-pil's face swelled up almost instantly. That completely shattered his expectations. In a space this narrow, Ma Seok-do should not have been able to generate that kind of power at all. Before he could fully process it, another heavy punch smashed straight into his face, and only then did Cho Won-pil finally understand. Ma Seok-do had not shattered those windows out of anger. He had done it to create room to generate power. Everything that looked like reckless desperation had actually been a calculated move to carve out enough space to punch. After taking hit after hit, Cho Won-pil finally snapped. If Ma Seok-do had created space for himself, then Cho Won-pil did not need to stay bound by the old rhythm either. As long as he could swing the knife, the advantage was still his. But the moment he tried, he realized his blade had been caught fast by the car frame beside him. Short strikes still worked, but a longer weapon had become too awkward and too long to use properly. The range advantage he had been so proud of had suddenly turned into dead weight. In the next second, Ma Seok-do blasted him away with another punch, and Cho Won-pil crashed hard onto the ground. Ma Seok-do stepped in and yanked him up by the collar, then drove another punch straight into his face. For the first time, Cho Won-pil panicked. and started begging him to stop. But Ma Suk-do ignored him completely and kept raining punches down on him. Under that storm of blows, a wet stain slowly spread across Cho Won-pil's pants. Desperate now, he tried one last time to hide behind his position and threatened Ma Suk-do, saying, "This is insubordination. You're a Hwang gang member daring to attack one of the gang's action captains. Jo Tae-se cares more than anything about rules. If he learns of this, he will never let you off. No matter how strong one man is, you can never stand against the entire Hwang gang." But before he could finish, Ma Suk-do cut in with a smile and asked, "Do you really believe that setting Poppy Gang loose on you is something So Sonyep could have pulled off alone?" The scene shifted back to earlier, when Poppy Gang's people sat across from another man and laid out the situation. Cho Won-pil crossed into our territory and is running drug deals in secret. We know making an enemy of Hwang Gang will bring nothing good. But this time, the one in the wrong is clearly Cho Won-pil. The man who had come to demand answers was Poppy Gang's #1 figure, Boss Lee Chung-sa, and the man sitting across from him was, of course, Hwang Gang's true boss, Jo Tae-se. Jo Tae-se calmly replied, "Men like us, the kind who survived on this turf by not even fearing the government, have no reason to speak in such a low, cautious tone. As for Cho Won-pil dealing drugs in secret, I won't intervene." And the meaning behind those words was obvious enough for Lee Chung-sa to understand. Hwang Gang did not touch drugs. Since Cho Won-pil had broken the rule, he deserved to die. At that point, Cho Won-pil finally understood the truth. Jo Tae-se had completely thrown him away. He was filled with bitter resentment. After making that man so much money, he still ended up as nothing more than a disposable dog to be killed once the grinding was done. In the very next second, he dropped to his knees and desperately begged Ma Suk-do to spare him, no matter what it took. He kept insisting, "There has to be some misunderstanding on the boss's side. If I can just meet Jo Tae-se in person and explain it myself, everything can still be fixed. As long as you let me live, I'll do anything." But what Ma Suk-do said next left him completely stunned. "Take your clothes off." Cho Won-pil froze for a second, thinking Ma Suk-do had some twisted taste. But Ma Suk-do was not talking about his clothes. What he wanted stripped off was the role itself, the skin of Action Team Captain. In other words, Cho Won-pil was going to hand that position over. Even then, Cho Won-pil still refused to budge, insisting, "This is blatant insubordination. It's absolutely impossible." Ma Suk-do shot back at once, saying, "Just like I already said, I have a plan. A plan as perfect as my own face." Seeing that the man still would not fold, Ma Suk-do stopped wasting words and drove a brutal punch straight into his face, knocking Cho Won-pil out cold on the spot. Not long after that, Cho Won-pil was tied up tight and gagged, then hauled in front of So Sang-up to await judgment. Even So Sang-up clearly had not expected Ma Suk-do to actually beat that lunatic into submission. Ma Suk-do then asked him, "What are we supposed to do now?" So Sang-up's expression darkened as he replied, "We do exactly what the boss ordered." The moment he said it, he pulled out a knife from behind him, but instead of using it himself, he held it out toward Ma Suk-do, making it obvious that he wanted him to do the killing. Ma Suk-do's heart tightened immediately. As a police officer, he had no intention of staining his hands with blood for real, but So Sang-up was obviously not joking. In his eyes, if Cho Won-pil lived, what came next would not just be punishment, it could mean prison. So Ma Suk-do quickly played dumb and asked So Sang-up to demonstrate first. For the sake of saving face, So Sang-up had no choice but to step up himself, even though inside he was just as terrified. After all, he had never actually killed anyone in his life, so he started swearing under his breath to work up the nerve, lifting the knife as if he was really about to send Cho Won-pil straight to hell. Realizing that death might actually be right in front of him this time, tears suddenly started spilling from Cho Won-pil's eyes. So Sang-up, who had been about to stab him, saw the whole thing clearly, and the contrast was almost absurd. So Sang-up's twisted, vicious expression on one side, and Cho Won-pil's tear-streaked face on the other. Seeing that, So Sang-up could not stop a flicker of pity from rising in him. Ma Suk-do immediately warned him, "Don't be fooled by crocodile tears." But So Sang-up still forced himself forward and ordered, "Since he's already confessed everything, it's time to finish it." When Ma Suk-do kept making excuses, So Sang-up even brought up the earlier insubordination issue to pressure him, while Ma Suk-do simply continued playing dumb, and insisting he did not understand any of these gang rules. The two kept arguing until the whole thing turned ridiculous, and they ended up basically asking Cho Won-pil himself how exactly he should be killed. The moment the tape was ripped off his mouth, Cho Won-pil instantly started begging like a madman, saying he wanted neither the drugs nor the money anymore. He only wanted to live. He kept swearing, "I truly regret everything now. I've already lowered myself this far. Please, just let me go." Still holding the knife as he stepped closer, Seol-sun-up ground out, "I don't want blood on my hands either, but some things cannot be solved with a simple apology. If I don't kill you today, the one who dies later might be me. Only a complete idiot would spare someone like you. And besides, with the kind of trash you are, if we let you live now, you will absolutely come back to kill us later." But just as those words landed, Cho Won-pil suddenly started smashing his forehead into the ground over and over, and the sheer shamelessness of it completely caught So-sang-up off guard. For a second, he could not even understand what he was doing. It kept going until blood flew everywhere and even teeth came loose. And only then did Cho Won-pil finally choke out, "I can tell everyone I already died in the fire. If the body is burned beyond recognition, nobody will be able to identify it. As for you, actually murdering me won't be nearly as easy to clean up as you think. From now on, I will live like a rat in hiding, never showing my face again. Please, just spare me this once." That spineless, utterly humiliating style of begging left both Ma Sek-do and So-sang-up staring in disbelief. In the end, So-sang-up could only sigh and tell Ma Sek-do to clean up the scene, effectively deciding to let Cho Won-pil live for now. Ma Sek-do still did not trust it one bit, but at that point, the truth was that they could not bring themselves to kill him on the spot either. Just as Ma Sek-do was still thinking through what to do next, Cho Won-pil suddenly called out to him. The moment Ma Sek-do looked up, a mouthful of blood sprayed straight into his face, and in that split second, when his vision was blocked, Cho Won-pil sprang up and bolted for the door. Ma Sek-do immediately shouted, "So-sang-up, stop him." But So-sang-up was a man who lived by brains, not by his body, and even against an enemy who was barely able to fight back. The knife she swung was still easily slipped by when Cho Won-pil ducked low. In the next instant, Cho Won-pil drove his head straight into So-sang-up's stomach and blasted past him. Ignoring the blood still hanging from the corner of his mouth, Cho Won-pil ran for his life. Running, while tearing free the last of the restraints still clinging to his body, with pain exploding through him so hard it felt like his entire body might burst apart at any second. Even so, one thought kept him moving. He was still alive. The drugs from the unfinished deal and the money were still in the car. If he got those back, then whether he laundered his identity clean or fled the country, he could still start over. He frantically looked around, trying to find his vehicle. When he had jumped out earlier, it had been too rushed for him to even remember exactly where he had parked. But, luckily, the Jeep still stood out among the other cars. So he found it quickly. Open the door, get in, start the engine. The whole sequence flowed without a break. Only then did Cho Won-pil finally let himself breathe, feeling for the first time that maybe he had really made it. As he sped away, he kept cursing under his breath, "Damn it, I almost got taken down by those bastards." And before long, that turned back into smug satisfaction. Sure enough, luck was still on his side today. Grinding his teeth, he swore that no matter what it cost, he would wipe out Ma Sek-do's family, his men, everyone. He would kill every last one of them. But while he was busy indulging in that thought, he never noticed the pair of eyes fixed coldly on him from the back seat. And in the very next second, two hands shot out from behind and clamped viciously into his side. Cho Won-pil let out a raw scream, while Ma Sek-do tightened his arms around him and coolly told him, "Buckle up, it's for your safety." Shocked and furious, Cho Won-pil demanded to know how the hell he had ended up in the car. Ma Sek-do answered calmly, "I've been waiting in the back seat since the moment you were running around like a headless animal trying to find your car." He added a mocking remark too. That earlier apology of his had been directed at the wrong person. The ones you really owe an apology to are all the people you've tormented up to now, and all the lives ruined by the drugs you spread. As the words left his mouth, Ma Sek-do cinched his arms even tighter and said, "From this point on, this is your seatbelt. And this seatbelt will decide whether you live or die. I will personally teach you what the road of repentance really looks like. Now, turn right." As the command came down, the force tightened again and snapped ribs on Cho Won-pil's right side, making blood burst from the corner of his mouth as he screamed, "Dot!" And the car veered sharply right with it. For the rest of the drive, the only things filling the vehicle were Ma Seok-do's calm instructions and Cho Won-pil's increasingly broken howls. When they were finally near the destination, Ma Seok-do tightened his grip once more and coldly said, "Now, brake." The car rolled to a stop. And when it did, they were sitting right in front of the police station. Not long after, Lee Sang-yong came out in person after receiving word, and the sight in front of him left him frozen for a beat. Because inside the car there was only an unconscious Cho Won-pil and the backpack and drugs still clutched in his arms. Then the view shifted again, back to Hwang-gun's base. So Sang-up was calmly reporting to the three men in front of him. Terrified of dying at the boss's hands, Cho Won-pil chose to turn himself into the police with the drugs, rather than face death, hoping to hide inside a prison where he might survive, even as he said the words with a straight face. However, his nerves were stretched tight underneath, because he had never expected the most troublesome people in the room to end up gathered in one place at the same time. Sitting in front of So Sang-up at that moment were Hwang-gun's three action team captains. The first to speak was the handsome man in the floral shirt with long hair, Moo Jin-hyuk, one of Hwang-gun's action team captains. Sitting beside him was the broad-shouldered brute in a sharp suit, Gu Man-ji, his hands folded in front of him. The last one was Peng Young-ha, wearing a short-sleeved shirt, a coiling dragon tattoo on his right arm, lettering on his left, and a sharp scar carved across the corner of his mouth. The three of them took turns talking, and every word carried the same meaning. How had someone like Cho Won-pil, who was not even true Bomshan blood, ever climbed into a cadre position in the first place? And as the conversation turned, the blame naturally shifted until it landed squarely on Seo Sang-up's head. Only after they had vented enough did So Sang-up finally speak, saying, "Now that Cho Won-pil's position is open, the boss has already chosen a new action team captain." And yes, just like everyone had guessed, the one who walked in was Ma Seok-do and his group. Because he had played the biggest role in taking down Cho Won-pil, Ma Seok-do had now officially become Hwang-gang's new action team captain. The instant that was announced, all three reacted differently. Gu Man-ji was the first to push back, saying it was absurd. Men like them had clawed their way up since the Bumchon gang era, risking their lives for years just to sit where they sat now. Moo Jin-hyuk, however, took the opposite stance. In his eyes, all that mattered was whether the work got done. The old giants had already been dragged away in chains, so there was no point clinging forever to the old order. Peng Young-ha added that an organization without rules was no organization at all. Since this was the boss's decision, they had no choice but to accept it. But the truth remained. Whatever legitimacy used to exist was already starting to rot. Just as the argument kept building, one of the underlings suddenly rushed in, visibly flustered, and interrupted them. Then he announced in a loud voice that the boss had arrived. The words made every nerve in Ma Seok-do's body tighten at once. He thought back to those high school days when he had boxed alongside that man, watched him tear through the ring on the way to a championship, and remembered that the whole reason he had started boxing in the first place was because of that same man. As the elevator doors slowly opened, that long-awaited moment finally arrived. For the first time, Ma Seok-do was standing in one of Hwang-gun's major meetings, finally seeing with his own eyes the ultimate target he had sacrificed everything to reach. The man he had infiltrated the underworld to destroy. The man his past grudges demanded he personally bring down. Hwang-gun's true boss, Jo Tae-se. Jo Tae-se was the first to speak, asking, "Is the man in front of me the one who earned all the credit this time?" So Sang-up immediately confirmed it, and even added that without Ma Seok-do stepping in, he himself might have died at Cho Won-pil's hands. Hearing that, Jo Tae-se took a longer look at Ma Seok-do, then casually remarked that his fists definitely had something to them. After that, he reached out a hand and added, "Even if you don't exactly look like the sharpest guy in the room, still, congratulations on becoming action team captain." But the one who reached out and answered that hand was not Ma Seok-do. It was Dharma standing beside him. Dharma immediately bowed and thanked him over and over, promising that from now on he would devote himself completely to the organization. Time pulled back a little. Earlier, Dharma had still been standing there in total disbelief, asking, "Am I really about to become action team captain? But you are clearly the one who captured Cho Won-pil." Ma Seok-do never denied that. He simply said, "Yes, I was the one who took Cho Won-pil down, but a position like action team captain is supposed to rise through seniority. If I skip over every man ahead of me and take it directly, nobody would accept it. Besides, I already belong to your line. Since the job is done, it makes perfect sense for you, as the superior on this line, to be rewarded. Hearing that, even Dharma was left staring, almost unable to understand when Ma Sek-do had started thinking that far ahead for him. Pu, standing nearby, could not hold back his question. He could not understand. After all the risk we took to catch Cho Won-pil, why did we go out of our way to hand him over to the police? He was sure the other action team captains would never let something like that slide if they found out. Ma Sek-do knew exactly how it would look, but he still had a line he refused to cross. No matter how rotten a person is, he's still a human being. Killing isn't something you can just step over lightly. Even if the other side was a gangster, he had no intention of turning himself into the kind of man who treated murder like routine. And beyond that, he had already thought through the bigger picture. The smartest move now was to push Dharma into the action team captain seat, while he himself stayed in the shadows and kept investigating. Only then would it become much easier to dig up the evidence, tying Joe Taisei to Chairman Jang. Seo Sang-up, for his part, was probably thrilled with that arrangement too. If Ma Sek-do really took the captain seat himself, it would become much harder for Seo Sang-up to keep skimming money the way he used to. Even so, standing face to face with Joe Taisei now, one question still would not leave Ma Sek-do's mind. Had this bastard really forgotten who he was? At that moment, all the memories and all the tangled thoughts seemed to draw together into one point. Back at the coronation scene, just as Dharma was about to accept everyone's congratulations, one sudden voice cut straight through the moment. Gu Man-ji stepped forward and openly argued that the boss's original order had been to kill Cho Won-pil, and Dharma had failed to complete that task. On that point alone, he had no right to sit in the action team captain's seat. More importantly, Cho Won-pil was now in police hands, and the second he started talking, every dirty business the organization had buried could be dragged into the open. Before Gu Man-ji could even finish speaking, a heavy stomp cracked through the room, and the man who stepped forward stopped right in front of him, his voice low but crushingly clear. Cho Won-pil broke the rules, and once the rules are broken, death is the only answer. That does not change. The one who had cut everyone off was none other than Hwangang's deputy boss, Cho Sojo. His gaze swept coldly over the room as he told them, there will be no problem on Cho Won-pil's side. The scene shifted and Cho Won-pil was now sitting alone in an interrogation room with two police officers across from him. What surprised them was that after hours of questioning, he still had not said a single meaningful word. The amount of drugs on the table was obviously not personal use scale, it was organization-level stock. The officers kept asking what faction he belonged to and even hinted that cooperating could help him later. But Cho Won-pil showed no sign of opening his mouth. He understood better than anyone that the moment he mentioned Hwanggang, he would become a rat. And once that happened, prison would not save him. The gang would hunt him down anyway. Just then, the older detective who had spoken very little finally stood up and told the younger officer to step outside with him for a cigarette. The younger man looked puzzled but followed, though not before warning Cho Won-pil, by the time I get back, you had better be ready to talk. Yet before leaving, the older detective gave Cho Won-pil one long loaded look, and soon the door closed again, leaving him alone in the room. Sitting there by himself, Cho Won-pil's thoughts churned violently. Ma Sek-do had every chance to kill him, but chose not to, and the more he thought about it, the more humiliated he felt. It was as if he had been looked down on so completely that he was not even worth killing. But then another thought followed. Thanks to Ma Sek-do, he was still alive and sitting there now. He mocked himself inwardly that even rolling in filth like a dog was better than dying, and maybe his luck still had not run out after all. He was already starting to imagine how he would take revenge on Ma Sek-do once he got out. Then the interrogation room door slowly opened again, and Cho Won-pil assumed the detectives had returned. In that instant, he made up his mind that this time he would spill everything about the drug operation and force the police to wipe out the whole organization. But when he looked up and saw who it was, he froze. Because it was not the police at all. It was someone dressed like a middle-aged woman selling yogurt. He could not make sense of why someone like that would be in an interrogation room. What he did not know was that this ridiculous, eerie figure was actually Shin Sang-ui, the puppy gang action team captain he had nearly killed at the gas station, the man whose face had been badly burned. The moment froze there, with Shin Sang-ui slowly drawing a knife from behind his back and moving toward Cho Won-pil without a sound. At the same time, back at Hwangang's base, Joe Taisei's voice remained calm but cold enough to freeze the room. He said, "There's no need for anyone to worry about Cho Won-pil anymore. All you need to remember is one thing. Rules are rules, And once those rules are broken, death follows. This time, Poppy Gang will be the one to finish Cho Won Pil off, and that was their condition. For a moment, Ma Suk-do could not even process what Jo Tae-se was suddenly saying, and all he could do was stand there, staring at that face, feeling as though the man before him had become terrifyingly unfamiliar. The opponent he had once traded punches with in the ring was standing right in front of him now. Yet it felt as though an entire river stood between them. The scene shifted again. Dharma was buried in a dream, standing in the middle of the dorm with a grin stretched across his face, finally sitting in the action team captain's chair he had always wanted. After all that misery, good days were finally right in front of him. At seeing that stupid grin on his face, Ma Suk-do just walked over and slapped him straight out of the dream. Piecing together what Dharma had told him, Ma Suk-do finally started mapping out the internal structure of Hwanggang. The organization had 4 action team captains in total, and now Dharma occupied one of those seats. The remaining 3 captains were all men who had survived the collapse of Bumchun Gang after the war on crime. They were veterans who had carved their way through the bloodiest years with their own hands. Their seniority was not just on Cho Won Pil's level. In some cases, it exceeded it. And the man who had gathered those old and new forces together to build Hwanggang into what it was now was Hwanggang's deputy boss, Pang Young-ha. Ma Suk-do still could not understand how the police had let monsters like these run unchecked for so long, but he did not dwell on that for now. Instead, he turned to the others and told them, "If you listen to me, you can all rise the same way Dharma did." Mantu, however, looked confused and asked, "But I never even wanted to be an action team captain. Isn't the man who truly deserves that seat standing right here already?" Ma Suk-do answered calmly, "A coach was never meant to step into the ring personally. As long as I can stand on the outside and watch you climb higher, that alone is enough for me." The moment Mantu and Weasel heard that Ma Suk-do planned to push all of them into action team captain positions one day, the 2 of them lit up and immediately swore they would follow Boss to the death. Just then, the phone rang. Dharma got up to answer it, while Pai Yu stood nearby listening, a complicated feeling slowly rising inside him. At that moment, Pai Yu truly felt just how terrifyingly capable Ma Suk-do was. The man had not even been in the organization for that long, yet he had already changed so much in such a short time. Compared to that, Pai Yu felt like he had changed nothing. When it came to capturing Cho Won Pil, he had not been of any real help at all. He could not stop wondering when he would ever become as strong as Suk Do-hyung. Then Dharma, who had gone to answer the phone, suddenly called out to Ma Suk-do, his voice shaking, his whole body trembling, cold sweat covering his face. "Because someone outside is asking for you by name, and they want to see the boss." Hearing that, Ma Suk-do's heart sank too. But, in the next second, he forced himself to frown and asked Dharma directly, "Who exactly is looking for me?" Soon enough, Ma Suk-do arrived alone at the agreed location, and the moment he saw the familiar building in front of him, he could not help thinking to himself, "It really has been a long time, Ganghon Boxing Gym." This was the place where he had once trained in his youth, the old gym where he had spent endless days hammering away at the punching bag. He never imagined the other man would choose this place for their meeting. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, and the person waiting there had clearly been expecting him for a while. The man who wanted to see him was Jo Tae-se. The moment their eyes met, Jo Tae-se greeted him like an old acquaintance. "Long time no see, Ma Suk-do." Ma Suk-do immediately bowed and greeted him back, doing everything he could to keep his expression and body language natural. Jo Tae-se invited him to sit and have a drink, even telling him not to mind the men standing behind him. Then he personally poured Ma Suk-do a glass and told him to relax, not to be so stiff. Ma Suk-do answered respectfully, but he still kept a deliberate distance. Rules were rules, and he knew that very well. Hearing that, Jo Tae-se fell silent for a moment, but he did not argue. After that, Ma Suk-do cautiously asked how he had been all these years. Ever since that boxing match back in high school, this was the first real time they had met again. At the earlier meeting, Jo Tae-se had not shown any sign of recognizing him, so Ma Suk-do had started to think the man had forgotten him completely. But Jo Tae-se denied it outright, saying there was no way he could forget. Then added with a casual joke, "With a face like yours, it's hard to forget you anywhere." That line made one of the underlings nearby burst out laughing before he could stop himself. But the instant that laugh escaped, Jo Tae-se's face did not change in the slightest. He simply set his glass down heavily on the table. Almost at the exact same moment, Park Hwi-ju swung a dumbbell and smashed it directly into that underling's face. The whole thing happened so suddenly that even Ma Suk-do was left speechless for a second, while the underling was blasted clean off his feet. only to be yanked upright again by Park Hwi-ju before he could even hit the floor. Raising the dumbbell, Park Hwi-ju's voice turned ice cold as he asked one simple question. Is it funny? Then, the blows came again, one after another. The boss was speaking. How many times had they been told that in front of the boss, they were expected to know their place? As if the violence behind him did not exist at all, Jo Tae-se calmly continued, saying that of course there was a reason he had called Ma Suk-do there today. While speaking, he casually picked up the bottle again and held it toward Ma Suk-do, then bluntly asked him, "Do you want to be an action team captain?" Ma Suk-do was visibly taken aback. He clearly had not expected something like that, and instinctively replied, "A promotion that far out of order would probably violate the rules." But Jo Tae-se only smiled as if it were nothing and said, "I already made this clear before. In Hwanggang, I am the rule. Besides, weren't you aiming for the action team captain seat from the very start?" That single sentence slammed into Ma Suk-do so hard that his heart jolted. So much so that he did not even notice the liquor in his glass overflowing. Jo Tae-se's gaze rested quietly on his face, his tone as calm as ever. But the next words out of his mouth tore straight through Ma Suk-do's disguise. "Ma Suk-do, you're a cop, aren't you?" The instant those words left Jo Tae-se's mouth, Park Hwi-ju and every underling in the room went on alert, and the whole atmosphere froze solid. Cold sweat broke out across Ma Suk-do's back. He had no idea how the man in front of him had picked up on something like that. For one split second, a terrifying thought crossed his mind. Had Jo Tae-se really figured out I was a cop? The scene immediately jumped back to the night before the undercover operation began. After hearing Lee Sang-yeon's plan, Ma Suk-do had been filled with doubts. He could not understand how simply being Jo Tae-se's former classmate was supposed to make him the perfect candidate to infiltrate Hwanggang. Truthfully, he had no real confidence in it himself. More than that, he could not believe Jo Tae-se would ever trust him so easily. Was a traffic cop with a reputation for causing trouble really suited for a mission this big? But Lee Sang-yeon told him plainly that it was not just about the old school connection. There was a much bigger reason he had been chosen. As he said that, he raised a finger and pointed right at Ma Suk-do. "With that face of yours, anybody who sees you is going to think you look like a gangster first." Naturally, Ma Suk-do did not take that well. He shot back that he was still a police officer, so how could Jo Tae-se possibly fail to notice something was off? Several undercover officers had already been exposed and killed before. But Lee Sang-yeon turned it around and asked him, if a police officer is currently suspended and under disciplinary action, can anyone even pull his file properly? Ma Suk-do stopped cold and asked what exactly that was supposed to mean. Was Lee Sang-yeon making fun of the fact that he had been suspended? Lee Sang-yeon answered directly, "It means exactly what I said. A suspended police officer is actually the best kind of officer to hide." That method had already been used by senior officers back during the war on crime era. The problem was that all of them had later died at Hwanggam's hands, and the entire case had been buried. Then, Lee Sang-yeon finally told him the truth. There were people at the top levels of the police who were connected to Hwanggang, which was exactly why only Ma Suk-do could do this job. Police personnel systems were not fully cross-visible. Traffic division records could not be freely accessed by the violent crime side. The earlier undercover officers had been exposed because they belonged to the Criminal Investigation Division. In other words, the mole Hwanggang had planted inside the police was most likely somewhere in the criminal investigation system. But Ma Suk-do was a traffic cop. Those people would never be able to pull up hard proof that he was police. On top of that, he had been under suspension at the time, which made even normal identity checks far harder. That was why Lee Sang-yeon had kept repeating the same thing. There was no way Jo Tae-se could know he was a cop. The memory cut off there. Faced with Jo Tae-se's question now, Ma Suk-do did not panic. Instead, he leaned into it with a look of irritation. As though the thought annoyed him more and more, he picked up the glass in his hand and threw back a hard swallow. Then naturally brought up the fact that he had once failed the written portion of the police exam. He grumbled. The whole thing was a pain in the ass. In my mind, you fire 2 shots, slap cuffs on someone, and the job is done. Why the hell do they force people to memorize so many books? My brain just isn't built for that kind of nonsense, and those people judging me clearly failed to recognize talent when they saw it. Ironically, that improvised lie landed exactly where it needed to. Jo Tae-se smoothly picked it up and sneered. I already knew you could never have made it as a cop. A guy like you clearly was never built for studying. Only then did Ma Suk-do fully realize what had happened. Jo Tae-se had already looked into his background. When he could not confirm it through records, he had simply chosen to test him in person. The man's mind was terrifyingly sharp. Still, Just as Lee Sang-yong had predicted, at least one thing was true: the fact that he was a police officer had not actually been exposed yet. Even if that let him breathe a little easier for the moment. Ma Suk-do knew perfectly well that he was nowhere near safe enough to relax. Because Jo Tae-se was anything but ordinary, Dharma sat there in sunglasses, looking ridiculously pleased with himself. Ever since he became an action team captain, all the territory that used to belong to Cho Won-pil had now fallen into his hands. Seeing how full of himself he was, Ma Suk-do stepped in and drove a hard punch into his side, then casually reminded him, "Haven't you ever heard that the riper the rice, the lower it bows?" Then, Ma Suk-do picked up the contract beside him and asked, "What exactly is this about?" Dharma hurried to explain, "This should be that batch of vehicle rental contracts we signed." Their whole business, stripped to the core, was taking cars rented on long-term contracts and illegally subleasing them short-term. So naturally, the first step was securing those long-term rentals. Ma Suk-do already understood that much. But the real question was this: if these were neither Prados nor Azeras, why were they renting so many cars of this class in one shot? Dharma looked just as lost. "I have no idea. That was just the order from above. I don't know the reason either." But Ma Suk-do's instincts as a cop kept telling him this business was far from clean. He needed more information. So he smacked Dharma lightly on the head with the contract and warned him, "From now on, if anything suspicious comes up, you report it to me immediately." But just as he finished speaking, a voice rose from behind him and smoothly picked up the line, "Our new captain seems quite motivated." It was Hwanggang Action Team Captain Moo Jin-hyuk. Dharma immediately rushed over, bowing and scraping. "Boss, when did you arrive?" He hurriedly added, "Good work today, boss." Ma Suk-do naturally recognized him too, and his heart sank. This guy was supposed to run the entertainment venues, so why had he suddenly shown up here? Worse still, he had probably seen Ma Suk-do hit Dharma just a moment ago. But Moo Jin-hyuk only smiled and said, "Looks like you boys are having fun. I guess this is what people call after class time, huh?" The others quickly played along. Only then did Ma Suk-do quietly let out a breath. At the same time, he took a closer look at the man. Sure enough, someone from the entertainment side dressed the part, covered head to toe in designer brands. On the surface, he seemed easygoing enough, with nothing obviously wrong about him. Yet there was still something about him that made Ma Suk-do feel like the guy had a screw loose. And yet, a man like that stood on equal footing with Cho Won-pil, which caught him a little off guard. Dharma finally could not hold back anymore and asked, "Boss, what brought you here all of a sudden?" Moo Jin-hyuk simply reached out, patted Pu on the shoulder, and got straight to the point. "I'm here to take this kid today." It turned out that he had already noticed the kid at the last meeting and had thought even then that he would fit perfectly working at his place. Once finished, he added bluntly, "I'm not going to bother explaining any further," making it clear he was taking the boy then and there. Dharma's face stiffened on the spot, and he could only plead in a low voice, trying to use lack of manpower as an excuse to stop him from poaching Pu. But before he could even finish, Moo Jin-hyuk's expression changed in an instant. The pleasant smile vanished completely, leaving only a pair of wide eyes locked hard on Dharma. With a cold smile, he said, "Of course I know exactly what you want to say, but the venues on my side only start running late at night anyway, so there's no schedule conflict. I'm only borrowing Pu for a while." As he spoke, he lightly rested a hand on Dharma's shoulder. Although it sounded polite on the surface, it was unmistakably an order. Dharma was furious inside, but he did not dare say a word back. In the end, all he could do was nod and accept it. Only then did the satisfied smile return to Moo Jin-hyuk's face, and he softly remarked, "That's more like it." Before long, night had fallen, and the two of them arrived at their destination. The lavish high-rise in front of them was Moo Jin-hyuk's turf. Ma Suk-do had assumed it was just another venue, but when he looked up, he realized the entire building was packed, floor to floor, with entertainment clubs. Pu asked why Ma Suk-do had come along too. Ma Suk-do casually answered, "I'm the boss. Of course I have to come." But the truth was, his real goal was to pull Moo Jin-hyuk onto his side as well. Right now, the strongest faction inside Hongkong belonged to Deputy Boss Park Hui-ju. So Ma Suk-do needed power that could stand against him as soon as possible. His plan was simple: win over the action team captains one by one and become a true confidant of Jo Tae-se as fast as he could. Then he noticed the wig on Pyu's head and casually asked about it. Pyu explained that if they were going out to handle business, then appearance mattered. At first, Ma Suk-do did not really get it. In his mind, they were just here to work security. But then he remembered Pai-yu was at that age where looks mattered a lot. Around then, Moo Jin-hyuk came over to greet them and casually praised his own judgment, saying Pai-yu looked a lot better with the wig on. When the two of them called him boss, Moo Jin-hyuk immediately corrected them and said, "In public, call me president." He then asked why Pai-yu's friend had come along too, and Ma Suk-do smoothly brushed it off with the same excuse as before. But looking at Moo Jin-hyuk acting all loose and carefree like that, Ma Suk-do could not help wondering how a guy like him managed to run a place properly. Just then, the two underlings by the elevator saw Moo Jin-hyuk and immediately bowed with full respect. Ma Suk-do had assumed Moo Jin-hyuk would answer with the same lazy grin he always wore, but in the next second, Moo Jin-hyuk's face hardened, and he sharply scolded the underling who had been standing there with his legs spread. He stressed again and again, "Security staff are the first thing customers see. Since you represent the face of the venue, how can you stand like that?" Ma Suk-do and Pai-yu stood there staring, genuinely stunned. Only then did Ma Suk-do realize that once Moo Jin-hyuk was actually working, he turned into a completely different person, serious to an extreme, even harsh. A man who normally looked that unserious still held a stable seat as one of Hwanggan's action team captains. And Ma Suk-do could not help thinking about how someone like that should be handled if you wanted to truly win him over. Once they got into the elevator, the two quietly talked about Moo Jin-hyuk. They had thought he was just some sloppy fool, but the moment work started, he became someone else entirely. Soon the elevator stopped on the 7th floor. The instant the doors opened, both of them froze. The hallway was packed with young men in all kinds of outfits, gathered in little groups and making a noisy mess. Ma Suk-do could not understand why there were so many security guards. No matter how busy the place was, it still made no sense. Even if they were all there for interviews, every one of them looked about the same type as Pai-yu. There was no way a crowd like this could actually handle real trouble. Then, someone squeezed through the crowd and called out to them, saying, "The president already gave the word. We're short on manpower right now, so you two need to come along immediately." The man led them all the way to a door, and the instant it opened, the sight inside made Ma Suk-do freeze on the spot. Inside the lavishly decorated room sat a group of women drinking and laughing together. Ma Suk-do immediately lowered his voice and asked Pai-yu what kind of place this was, and Pai-yu quietly told him, "It's a high-end entertainment venue specifically catering to female clients." At that point, Ma Suk-do finally understood the situation completely. They had not come here to work security at all. They had been brought here to do service work. Listening to the constant teasing and playful remarks from the women around them, Ma Suk-do had only one thought left in his head. He needed to get out of there immediately. He was absolutely not built for that kind of situation. First he had to get out, then figure out another way. But just as Ma Suk-do was about to look for a chance to slip out, he glanced up and froze on the spot. Moo Jin-hyuk was somehow already standing outside the glass by the door, silently watching everything happening inside. Ma Suk-do had no idea when the man showed up, but he did not need to think hard to know why. Moo Jin-hyuk was almost certainly there to inspect how they were doing. The two women in the room saw him standing there stiffly and immediately started laughing, teasing him. "What are you waiting for? Hurry over and serve us properly." At that moment, only one word rang through Ma Suk-do's head: screwed. Because he knew perfectly well that if he ran now, Moo Jin-hyuk would catch on instantly. And if that happened, his whole plan to earn the man's approval, pull him closer, and use that connection to check the deputy boss's faction would collapse on the spot. But in the very next second, a thought suddenly flashed through Ma Suk-do's mind. Since this place was a luxury venue built specifically to serve women, then maybe it was time to show them what real service looked like. And right after that, amid Pai-yu and the others shouting in total shock, and under Moo Jin-hyuk's utterly disbelieving stare from outside the glass, Ma Suk-do unleashed his trump card.